Okay, we are streaming on YouTube whenever you're ready.
Okay, I will be ready in 1 second, Paul. Okay, thank you. Had a little difficulty. It's 7 o'clock, so welcome to the Lafayette Planning Commission meeting. Today is April 18th. And we can go ahead and get started. So we will start with roll call. Well, actually, before I get to that, I will just remind any members of the public who would like to comment on any items tonight, or just provide public comment on an item not on the agenda. You can access the meeting through the links on the first page of the agenda. And you can provide public comment at the appropriate time during the given item. So roll call tonight. We will start with Commissioner Farsan.
Present. Hello.
Hi. Commissioner Maggio.
Present.
Commissioner Mason. I saw you say present.
Okay, sorry. Present.
Thank you. Commissioner Sturm.
Present.
Vice Chair Lavange.
Present.
And Commissioner Radnich, I'm present. And Commissioner Heising is absent tonight. Excused absence. I do know, Renata, before we get to the adoption of the agenda, Joshua, you are on. So for staff, item 5B, I understand the applicant has provided revised drawings, and Joshua, would you like to speak slightly to item 5B? It seems like we might want to pull that from the consent calendar.
Sure thing. So yes, the direction from the commission at last meeting was a recommendation to prepare a denial resolution for the consent calendar of the subsequent meeting. And the applicant did submit a revision, a new revised set of plans. So I believe what the commission can do is, when it comes to, and Renata, feel free to correct me on this, but when it comes to the consent calendar, there are the general items that you can move to adopt all of them. But before you do that, you can move to pull that item from the consent calendar, and then it becomes a continued public hearing. The public hearing is reopened, and the revisions can be considered as part of the hearing.
Perfect. Okay, so what we would do then is we look for a motion to adopt the agenda. Then once we get to item 5 consent calendar, before adopting the consent calendar portion, we would pull item 5B and move it to continued public hearing to become a new item 6. So with that, do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, thank you. A motion by Commissioner Maggio and second by Commissioner Farsan. And we'll take a roll call vote. Commissioner Farsan.
Aye.
Commissioner Maggio.
Aye.
Commissioner Mason.
Aye.
Commissioner Sturm.
Aye.
Vice Chair Lavange.
Aye.
And Chair Radnich. Aye. Okay, thank you. Now item 4 on our agenda, public comment. So this is time for, if anyone from the community would like to speak for an item that is not on this agenda or an upcoming agenda, now would be the time to raise your hand. I'll look to staff to see if we have any public comments.
If you would like to make a public comment for an item not on tonight's agenda, please use the raise your hand function at the bottom of the screen and leave it up so we can promote you to speak. So the first commenter we have is Robert Lavoie.
Welcome, Mr. Lavoy. Can you hear us?
Yes, thank you for taking this comment. I just wanted to ask you guys to clarify the deadline for the EIR comments, because I ran into Farshad at the track meet on Friday night, and it was my understanding that we would have until May 2nd to get those in, sort of coinciding with the submission to the city council on the sites. However, I think it was Libby talked to Renata, and her understanding was that everything's due tonight at midnight. So if you guys could just clarify that, I'd really appreciate it, because otherwise I got to scramble and get going tonight. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Renata, would you like to chime in, or would you like me to chime in? Feel free.
Sure thing. So there are two processes underway kind of concurrently right now. So we have been undertaking the update of the housing element, which the General Plan Advisory Committee and now the Planning Commission has been working through. And that's the, citywide planning document. The draft environmental impact report, or DEIR, is the analysis assessing any environmental impacts that would result from that housing element plan, or rather the maximum potential impact. So we work within that. The Planning Commission was to review a complete draft of that plan tonight, but that has been postponed until May 2nd. The draft environmental impact report, there's a mandatory public comment period, which opened on February 8th. We held a public comment session at Planning Commission on March 7th. And the original comment deadline, I believe, was April 4th, but instead we extended it to April 18th. So comments on the draft environmental impact report are due tonight at midnight. And that will be separate from the draft housing element. So that conversation is ongoing with the Planning Commission and will be reviewed by the City Council ultimately. But if you have comments on that and the analysis, environmental analysis, that document is available for review on the city's website at lovelafayette.org/CEQA, and written comments can be sent to generalplan@lovelafayette.org. So they're related but kind of separate reviews, but comments are due tonight at midnight.
Thank you, Renata. Commissioner Farson?
I just wanted to follow up on that. So since we're getting the final draft on May 2nd for the Planning Commission to review, committee members can still weigh in publicly with comments during that meeting though too. Written may today, but they can still weigh in orally at that meeting related to that final draft though. Right. Or am I just want to make sure we're kind of all on the same page, because I've gotten questions from everyone. So I want to make, I completely understood what Renata just said, but then the May 2nd meeting, is this still open to public comment since it's a public hearing or not?
Not the draft DIR.
Okay.
The CEQA statutorily, there's a 45-day review period that was extended
Right.
per City Council's request. And then comments received during the review period are addressed in writing in the final EIR. Public is always welcome to provide comments on, a discretionary process or a project associated with it, but for written comment responses in the final EIR, it's comments received during the public comment period.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Mr. Lavoy, does that clarify things?
Yes,
Perfect.
thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for your comment. Any others?
If you would like to make a public comment, please use the raise hand function at the bottom of your screen. There are no more hands raised. Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, so with that, we can close item 4, the public comments, and move to item 5, consent calendar. Would anybody like to make a motion to pull item 5B off of the consent calendar, move to continued items under item 6, and then adopt the rest of the consent calendar?
I'll go ahead and make that motion. So I move to take item 5B, which is HDP 27-21 Chopra, out of the consent calendar and move it to continued public hearings, and the remainder 5A and C to remain on the consent calendar.
Thank you. We have a motion by Commissioner Farsan
Second.
and a second by Vice Chair Labange. Thank you. And we'll take a roll call vote for them. Commissioner Farsan,
Aye.
Commissioner Maggio,
Aye.
Commissioner Mason,
Aye.
Commissioner Sturm,
Aye.
Vice Chair Labange,
Aye.
and Chair Radnich. Aye. Thank you. And Renata, I don't need to note each time that Commissioner Heisian isn't here, right? Like for the tally? Okay.
We'll document it in the action agenda.
Okay, thanks. Okay. So then, I apologize. I should have specified that since we're pulling 5B and moving it to section or item 6, I guess I just assumed we would put it first in item 6. Is there reason why staff should feel otherwise? I didn't think about that part ahead of time. I think we can hear it first and then move to the old 5A. Does that work? Okay. So item HDP 27-21 Chopra, R20 zoning. This is a request for phase 1 siding massing, design review, grading permit, tree permit. And Joshua, I believe you have a staff presentation.
I do. I have a brief presentation along with a brief staff report that was published. So I'll jump right into the presentation.
Great.
Very brief. Let me get into presentation.
So while he's pulling that up, just a reminder for the Planning Commission, we'll conduct this public hearing, and then if all is well, we would adopt a resolution tonight. Is that correct, Joshua? Or are we, I guess we're providing feedback that then you would bring a resolution next time, right? Since our original resolution was for denial.
So the original recommendation was to prepare a denial resolution. If you don't believe that the revisions are sufficient to address the commission's concerns, then you can adopt the denial resolution that's prepared, because it would be the same findings in terms of the same findings could not be made. If you believe that the revisions do address what the commission's concerns are and have changed your opinion on it, then I believe what it would be is you would make a motion to prepare an approval resolution for the next meeting's consent calendar.
Perfect, thank you.
All right, and I'm going to turn my light on. So Commissioner Maggio do that, and thought that was a good idea because the sun is setting. Okay, we can jump right in. Does everyone see the title page of my presentation?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. So as you're familiar with, this is HDP 27-21, the Chopra residence, and this is a phase 1 hillside development permit to construct a new single-family residence on a previously undeveloped parcel, seen here in between Hanson Drive and Skywood Road. This has been heard 3 times before, so this is the 4th hearing. At the previous meeting, commissioners restated concerns that they have with a privacy, visibility impacts, as well as the massing in terms of neighborhood compatibility. And they provided some direction in terms of what the concerns are, which were to address the visual and privacy impact for adjacent neighbors, and that the overall size of the project, it still seems large for the vicinity, and it should be reduced to match neighborhood compatibility, and that the massing on the east elevation reflects that large size, especially for visual impacts downhill. So what I have here is a screenshot of the site plan. And as you can see, the residence has been modified slightly. The red is what you saw at the first hearing, and then the blue is what you saw at the previous hearing in March. And of course, this is reflective of the project plans that are in the staff report. So going to the next page for the main revisions, the applicant decreased the gross floor area by about 242 square feet. So the total space of the residence is now 5,042 square feet, and that does include the garage, by modifying the exterior walls, and they did modify the northeast, so the rear elevation closest to the neighbors along St. Mary's. They pulled it back about 6 feet and added some articulation here. They did not modify this component, and then the bottom floor, they tucked it in a little bit, but it still protrudes outward like this. And as you can see in the elevation, they slightly modified the roof and pulled it in by approximately 6 feet. And as Chair Radnich had mentioned in the previous meeting, it is very helpful to see superimposed what the revisions have, or what revisions have been made, reflective to what's currently presented. And the architect, Steve Kubicek, did a nice job in presenting all of the iterations that you've seen so far, from the first hearing to the last hearing to this hearing. And in terms of public comments, staff did receive 2 public comments, one from the downhill neighbor at, I'm forgetting the address, I believe it's 3425 St. Mary's, with continued concerns about visibility and massing impacts. And there was one comment in support from a representative of Mr. Chopra, but for the edits and revisions made, staff believes that based on the commissioner's comments and indication of the sentiments for the project at the previous hearing, staff believes that the revisions made are insufficient to address staff's concerns. And you've done 2/3 of the recommendation, but staff does recommend adopting PC Resolution 2022-06 to deny the project. And that is the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Joshua. I appreciate it. Are there any questions for staff before we open up to public comment? Sorry, before we open it up to the applicant's presentation. Okay, thank you. Is the applicant's team here tonight?
Yes, so we have Mr. Chopra, who is the property owner. We have Steve Kubicek, the architect, and Alan Moore, who is a representative of Mr. Chopra, and I believe Mr. Moore will be doing the presentation for tonight.
And so Joshua, just to be clear, maybe this is actually a question for the applicant's team. So I do see in the public comment that we received, Mr. Moore had written a letter, you know, kind of asking about speaking tonight and appearing tonight. So just to be clear for the record, Mr. Moore is speaking on behalf of the applicant's team tonight during the presentation. And okay, I see you nodding your head. Yes, Mr. Moore, and then will not be providing public comment during the public comment portion.
That is correct. I included the communication for transparency's sake and so the commissioners could see it, but Mr. Moore is a representative of Mr. Chopra in this matter.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Before Ellen starts speaking, I would like some clarity just so we all understand. One of the things that's listed, Joshua, in the staff report is policy LU 2.3. Could you just
Mr. Kubitschek, your audio cut out. So can you just try speaking again? Can you hear us okay?
hear me all right now?
Can right now. So would you mind just re-saying what you were asking? You're asking about a specific policy in the staff report?
Policies that's listed in the staff report is LU 2.3. And I want to make sure that that is being applied appropriately to this project, because I think that there's a misinterpretation of that code where this project is concerned. So what is that code, Joshua, if you could let us know before we get into the analysis?
Sure. Chair, do you mind if I?
Yeah, that would be fine.
Okay. So policy LU-2.3 is in the land use element component of the city's current general plan. And that essentially outlines the intent of the Hillside Overlay District and the Hillside Development Permit process. And I believe I included the specific language in my staff report that structures in the Hillside Overlay area shall be sited and designed to be substantially concealed when viewed from below from publicly owned property. And then the hillsides and ridgelines should appear essentially undeveloped to the maximum extent feasible. So
So this is where my confusion comes, because this house is not seen from public.
Okay. So sorry, Joshua, to cut in. So I think what might be best is, since these are the same policies that have been presented in every staff report since we've seen this, so now the fourth time, I feel the applicant's team has had plenty of time to get clarification. So I think what might be good is if we can move forward with the applicant's presentation, that if there's still confusion by the planning commissioners regarding how to interpret a specific policy, then I would open it up to the planning commissioners to ask clarifying questions of staff, if that's okay. Okay, great, thanks. So Mr. Kubitschek, Mr. Moore, Mr. Chopra, welcome. And you have 10 minutes, thank you.
Thank you. This is Alan Moore, and thank you for the opportunity. My presentation lasts just about 4 or 5 minutes, and then I'll leave the remainder of the time to Steve and Paul. We did want to ask if there are public comments or time to leave us time for rebuttal, if that's the pleasure of the commission. Thanks so much. My name is Alan Moore. I'm a land use attorney with Wendell Rosen. We're at 1111 Broadway in Oakland. We've been working with Paul and Harneet Chopra with regard to their proposed residence off St. Mary's Road and Hanson Drive, as Joshua has indicated. By way of background, I did want to indicate I served as a planning commissioner myself for my hometown, 10 years for Walnut Creek, California. So I know you're all volunteers, and we greatly appreciate your community service and your consideration of this project. I did submit a detailed letter, as Joshua referenced, for tonight. I understand you have the letter. I'm not going to try to repeat that in my few minutes, but I do want to briefly make 4 points that I think that will kind of help summarize the letter, if that's okay. First, the reason I took this case, was that the Chopra family has proposed this house for 3 generations, for the parents, for Paul and Harneet, for their children, and the children's grandparents. They'll all live here. As I'll explain, the house is on a very large lot, 30,000 square feet, and it's specifically designed to accommodate this multi-generation family. Second, your commission has asked about reducing the house size and massing. The Chopra family has reduced the house size at each of your hearings, the 4 referenced hearings by Joshua, paraphrasing, from 5,800 square feet to 5,600 square feet to 5,200 square feet, and tonight all the way down to 5,042 square feet, which consists of only 4,200 square feet of living space. They've done as you've asked. Third, the Chopra family worked extremely hard to address all neighbor concerns. In fact, I've never seen it this way, but almost every neighbor has supported the project. We haven't got it to be unanimous. The one on the northeast is not, but almost every other neighbor has supported. 3 of the 4 immediate neighbors have shown support. And with regard to this 4th neighbor, we understand the commission has expressed an issue with regard to the northeast corner of the residence. And we keep in mind here, it's that upper part of the residence where the Chopras and the grandparents will be having their bedrooms. And so it's very difficult to scrunch those rooms down any further. However, we did it. We did it in response to your request. On April 8, our architect submitted a specific proposal to bring that upper level back another 5 or 6 feet, as explained by Joshua, and is shown by those submitted plans. So we did not forget about that area, did not ignore it. We propose a reduction there specifically to address this concern. Now, finally, the Chopra family has done everything you've requested. Believe me, when I took the matter, I went through every other hearing. They met with the neighbors per your request and received almost unanimous support. They've given, per your request, they've submitted a context map, one of the most detailed context maps I've ever seen, setting forth the distances, the floor area ratios, the first and second residence, the size levels, the size of the houses, and all the information right there at your fingertips. And they show that our house is now less than the FARs of the entire area. The median is about 18%, and we're down to 16%. And our house is now smaller from a square footage standpoint than several other houses in the area. Third, per your request, they've given you an extensive landscape plan and agreed to abide by it at this preliminary level to protect the privacy of the neighbors and specifically the complaining neighbor. And for these reasons, at your last meeting, March 21, staff supported the project. Staff indicated that even at the larger size that we proposed, we're now smaller. And even before the elevation was drawn back, they supported it and confirmed that this application complies with all the general plan policies with regard to site and massing. That was staff's recommendation. Now, they revised their recommendation, but only in response to conforming to your commission comments. Their recommendation for a larger site, larger residence, was to support. So we have staff support in writing for the project. We have neighbor support for the project, and we have documentary evidence support for the project. And for all these reasons, and for the reasons that the state legislature is proposing that we approve just this kind of housing for multifamily generations, we respectfully request your approval, or perhaps you could direct us to where we're missing the mark. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr.
That's my
Moore.
comments.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Moore. Mr. Chopra, as the applicant, is there anyone else on your team who would like to speak for the remaining 4.5 minutes? Mr.
Speak as well.
Just please feel free.
Yeah. So Alan has spoken very well, and Joshua did a great presentation. I would like to share my screen, however. I see that the clock is ticking during the time that that Chair was speaking. So hopefully
we can grant you back the 4 seconds, no problem.
You should be able to share your screen now.
Say it again.
You should be able to share your screen now.
I'm just trying to find the right screen. So I wanted to mostly point everyone to A1.3, which shows these 3D drawings. And these drawings right here are showing where we have come on the project. This is our first submittal. We pulled this section back further on the second submittal. This is when you decided that it should be, that it would be denied. And then this one is where we are today with a good amount of offset from the lower floor to the upper floor. The lower floor to the upper floor on this dimension is 12 feet. The lower floor to the upper floor on this dimension is 6 feet. The main thing that I wanted to point out, however, is that LU 2.3 as one of the reasons why the project. correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that this land use is mostly designed for how visible properties are from public viewing corridors and not from private property. House is not seen from viewing corridors such as St. Mary's Road. It is seen from the neighbor's properties. So whereas on page 2 of 3 of the staff report, it says that it should be substantially concealed when viewed from below publicly viewed property. And the reason that this is being cited is because it can be seen from the neighbor's property. And those two are in conflict with each other. This is not a good policy or a good land use policy to use in this property based on the fact that a neighbor can see it and not from a public viewing corridor. Also, point about the FAR of this property, whereas I know that Lafayette doesn't use FAR as a measure of the size of a house, it is cool in figuring out whether a house is appropriate for a site. And the fact remains that this property is one of the largest in the area. And if any property in this neighborhood could hold a larger home, it is a property such as this. It's over twice the size of the property that where the neighbor is in most conflict with the project. And so this property should be viewed as a property where an opportunity to create a multifamily house should be able to be done. The house complies with all of the setbacks, required setbacks, required heights. There's nothing that we are not complying with in the code from Lafayette. And so we request that you give us an approval on this project. I'm happy to answer any questions for you.
And not to step into your presentation time, but there is still a minute and a half if Mr. Chopra, if your team would like to take advantage of that minute and a half.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. And I don't think I have anything more to say. I think Alan and Steve kind of put everything out there. I just want to thank the commission as well as the staff for just kind of giving one more opportunity to look at this. And, you know, just to kind of reiterate, I think, I don't know how is the best way to define the scale, but if you kind of look at it from a floor to area ratio perspective, we are at 16% when the median floor to area ratio for the neighborhood is 18. If you look at just the absolute square footage perspective, you know, the living area of our current plan is 4,200 square feet approximately, which is less than, 3431 St. Mary's Road, which is one house down at 4249, and 3421 Hamlin Road, which is behind the house opposite to ours, which is 4286 square feet. So no matter how you look at it, either from a FAR perspective or from absolute square footage perspective, I believe it's below. So with that, I just kind of leave it up to the commission to decide what's the right thing to do, and we'd respect that. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Are there any questions from commissioners for the applicant's team before we open it up for public comment? Vice Chair LaBonge?
I just want to make sure I heard Mr. Moore correctly. I think you said that the staff recommended approval, and I took that for meaning that in a staff report, and if I misunderstood you, help me understand it. My recollection was the staff reports, there was not a recommended approval, so I don't want to get nuanced, but that caught my ear. So could you maybe flesh that out for me a little?
I can. Now I've lost my visual. Can everybody hear me though?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I've lost the visual and I didn't want to log out and log in. So I'll proceed without the video if that's okay. Can you can hear me?
But just so you know, Mr. Moore, we can see you. So
oh, you can? Okay.
Yes,
well,
just
that's
so
good.
You know.
And I'll still be, that's fine. Thank you so much. So I've lost my video of you all, but yes, thank you, Commissioner. Yes, I'll read directly from the staff report on March 21. final recommendation on the last page of that report, and I'm reading verbatim. I'll tell you if I'm paraphrasing, this would be verbatim. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission review the project revisions, conduct a public hearing, and direct staff to prepare an approval resolution for the April 4, 2022 consent calendar. Then there are other statements throughout that report where staff has indicated the screening provided by the landscape plan, et cetera, complies with LU 1-3. Another statement, as a result, the revised project is in compliance with LU 1.1. So staff's findings were clear, and then their recommendation, at least in my view, was clear.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I see where you were pointing. I got that. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's the only question I had, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for the applicants team? No? Okay. Then Renata and Joshua, we can open it up for public comment on this item, please.
Yes, if you would like to make a public comment on this item, please use the raise hand function at the bottom of your screen and leave it up, and we will promote you to speak. So first is Nancy Anderson, followed by Anita Ambleton.
Hi.
Welcome.
Hello again. This is like getting very familiar. Just to remind everybody, we're 100 feet closer than any other structure, so all neighbors are not created equal. Since the last time that we had a public hearing, we spent a little time with the city's residential hillside development guidelines. And it was really helpful to encapsulate or kind of crystallize our feelings about what's been going on, and to help maybe clarify for us how we felt about what was going on. It was published in 1990. It's available on the city's website, and it has a lot of drawings about do's and don'ts. We believe that there are certain elements of the Chopra project design currently that are not consistent with the guidelines. And this is, we're throwing out a lot of guidelines and tests and so forth and so on, but this is just the learnings that we had since the last hearing. First, the guidelines indicated that the design of a structure should conform to the natural topography of a lot, particularly a hillside lot. In this case, that runs west to east. The current design, the length runs of the Chopra structure south to north. And what that does is it puts the setbacks very close to the adjacent properties, which in this case are front yards and backyards. A little bit different because of the alignment of the lot against the adjacent properties. And in our case, that structure rises 35 feet above our back fence, and therefore compromises our sense of privacy and views, which we've said many times before. Second, there's a 3-car garage that constrains the upper level siding and setback because it runs perpendicular to the access road as opposed to parallel. And because of that, it pushes the upper level down the hill so that the maximum height of the mass is right over the back of our property. We also noticed in the most current submission that the lower level, which rises 17 feet, and that's +6 plus whatever other elevation from the back of our property, is moved closer to the property line at the north from the last submission. So I don't know if these guidelines are relevant or helpful, but that kind of crystallized for us our concerns because the siding and massing done in such a way, and I'm at 0, so I guess I win. Thank you very much.
That's positive. Thank you, Mr. Anderson. I know you were mid-sentence. There are two of you on there. Ms. Anderson, if you would like to speak for 3 minutes as a separate speaker, you are welcome. But it would have to come from you.
Thank you very much. I concur with what Richard has been saying. It's mostly the mass and the position of the building on the hill that is a major concern. And, you know, I feel that if the design had maybe been looked at a little bit differently and conforming with the hill, there could be as many square feet as they wanted and not as much mass in our backyard. So thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Are there any questions from the commissioners for the speaker? Okay, thank you both.
Thank you.
All right, the next speaker is Anita Ambleton. And if you would like to make a comment, please use the raise hand function at the bottom of the screen.
Hi.
Hi.
My name's Anita Umbleton. I live at 3356 Victoria Avenue. I'm in the downtown corridor. And I'm just kind of making a little bit more of a general comment, but I know Mr. Chopra from some work we've done with the schools and his family. And when I think about this project or any kind of project like this, I think that it makes a positive impact on Lafayette when people are building new homes and looking to plan for long-term growth of their family here in Lafayette. And I know that Mr. Chopra is a very positive influence on the city. And so when I look at that, I think we really need to encourage people by having, you know, the easiest time they can to do the projects that they'd like to do. We have clear guidelines, and I, you know, have nothing to do with any of your regulations and how this fits or doesn't fit exactly. But, you know, I see a lot of unkempt houses that are sometimes literally falling down as I'm walking through the streets. There's overgrown, you know, landscaping, trees falling down into houses. And I think when somebody wants to build a new home that's going to make our community look better, I don't think we should be, you know, stopping that. I think we should be encouraging things like that when people are renovating and trying to keep their homes nicer and upgrade the value of the homes in the area. So that's why I just wanted to give my support to this project and also to other homeowners, because I think we really want to be keeping Lafayette clean and nice. And that would be, I think, something that this house would do. And I think that he's a great addition to our community, and I would love to be able to help him keep it here. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the speaker? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Ms. Embleton.
Thank you. So there's one more speaker, Robert Lavoie. He will be brought into the panel.
Hello again.
Yeah, welcome. Can you hear us?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Please go ahead.
Great. I learned about this project listening in on a couple of other Planning Commission events, and just sort of took an interest in it. So I'd like to share some of my thoughts on some of the expenses and the concessions that the Chopra family has made in an attempt to be a good neighbor and build a beautiful home for their family, including their parents, which I think if you look at this as in place of multiple homes, it's a lot more reasonable than it's been made out to be. All but one neighbor has expressed support for the project. I'm actually a neighbor just down the street at Moraga and St. Mary's, although I don't have any views of their property. I ride the bike by all the time. From comments at the last planning meeting, I believe that Mr. Chopra has been very gracious and made every reasonable attempt to work with the neighbors, even offering to let them pick landscaping, which I think is very generous. The portion of the home with the best views over the valley and Mount Diablo has been set aside for bedroom space to preserve privacy for the neighbors down the hill. So even though it looks down on their property, they're not going to be spending time in these rooms peering out. Most people would have a wall of windows there. They're proposing spending tens of thousands of dollars for cutting into the hillside to push the house into the hill as much as possible. The actual footprint of the home is 3,800 feet, looking at the roof size, including the garage, which is smaller than at least 4 of the neighbors in absolute terms as a result of their 1,200 square foot basement. And more importantly, the FAR ratio shows the true scale of the home with respect to the lot. And that, as mentioned previously, they're at 16% compared to the average of the neighborhood at 18. If the Chopras were to build their home at the same scale as the neighbor who's complaining, they could build a 6,500 square foot home with the garage on top of that, 7,400 square feet total. Or inversely, if the neighbors had to reduce their house to the size of the Chopras, they'd have to cut 500 square feet out of their house, which I don't think they'd be very interested in doing. At current real estate valuations, $1,000 a square foot, the compromise of 765 square feet is a reduction of value in their house of $765,000, which is very serious. See, I'm running out of time. I have not been asked by the Chopras to speak on their behalf, and they may be embarrassed by what I'm saying, but I think the project should be approved without further delay, and staff recommended it. This house is scaled much smaller than similar houses because of the lot size, and that should be respected. They could build 2 ADUs, which would increase the house a lot more than 1,000 square feet. So
Thank you, Mr. Lavoy. Thank you. Are there any questions for the speaker? Okay, thank you for your comment.
Thanks a lot.
If there are any others who would like to give public comment on this item, please use the raise hand function at the bottom of your screen. There are no more hands raised.
Okay, thank you. So with that, we will close the public comment portion and bring it back to the applicant's team. So collectively, the applicant has 5 minutes to respond to anything said during public comment or provide any additional presentation that you would like to provide. Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Moore.
Okay, I would ask again, since I still don't have a visual, you can still hear me? My apologies, I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, we can hear you and see you.
Okay, thank you so much. So just taking a couple of things. Thank you for all the neighbors that commented, the next door neighbors, the other gentleman that commented. I appreciated the comments, and I know they're sincere. It's a little difficult to look at the Hillside ordinance and kind of pick and choose the parts of the ordinance that might apply here. For example, when the next door neighbor was concerned about us not conforming to natural topography, we were actually digging in and nestling in to bring the house massing in site lower. So one might infringe on one policy in order to achieve another policy with regard to visual impacts. With regard to Steve Kubitschek's reference to policy LU-2-3, his concern is correct. The policy wasn't raised in earlier staff reports, but just in this last one. And that policy, I was involved way back in, I guess, 92 when these things were adopted. But that policy was specifically enacted to address long vistas from publicly owned property. And we used that out at Lucas Ranch and some other larger projects, or maybe 8 or 9 homes, when there was a concern that folks from public trails or other public property could see them. It would be inappropriate to apply policy LU-2.3 to deny this project. Indeed, there's no house could comply with it because it says the house is designed to be substantially concealed, which no next door neighbor could do. I'm looking out my windows now at my neighbors. I have a half acre here, not as large as the Chopa residence, and I can see every house clear as day. And we're up in the foothills here. That policy was meant to be applied to publicly owned property only, and it's pretty clearly stated there. So we believe in sum that this is a project where we have almost unanimous support, where we've done all we can, and it just would seem to be a shame to turn the Chopers away at this point. If we're close, let us know, and we'll come back and make further tweaks. But we'd ask respectfully not to deny us outright. And with that, I'll turn it over to Paul or Steve.
I think Alan has said everything that I wanted to say. It's easy for someone who's not a design professional to think that there's a different way to design something without taking into consideration access and fire truck accessibility and emergency vehicles and all of those kinds of things. And so this house is designed appropriately and within all the required setbacks, and access to the property is appropriate as well for all considered, not only the homeowners, but for emergency vehicles and their guests as well. Questions for you, and Paul, if you have something you'd like to add. But I think that Alan has said everything that I needed to say in regards to the LU 1.1 and the LU 2.3, which seems to be the two topics that are driving the idea that this project might be denied. LU 2.3 should not be even considered in any sort of decision on this property. And L 1.1 should be something that is considered in relationship to the property size, not the size of the house, and whether that's the size of the property is appropriate to hold a house of. Any questions for me? And Paul, if you'd like to say something.
Yeah, thank you. So I just want to say there's basically 4 neighbors that touch the property lines on both sides on St. Mary's. The house sits between Hanson and Skywood. So there's 3431A St. Mary's Road and 825 Skywood Road that sit on the south side of it. And both of them have even at the last hearing, one of them, I know 3431A wrote to the commission that they completely supported, and they feel that everything that we've done and gotten their feedback on is appropriate. And on the other side, we have 3427 St. Mary's and 3425, and 3427 landowner also wrote to the commission last hearing stating that they believe that landscaping and everything supports what their concerns are, and they also supported it. So you have support from that perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, I'll bring it to the commission unless there's any last questions for the applicants team. I do have one question that I'd like to ask. So Mr. Kubitschek, this might be for you. One comment we're hearing a lot of is, concern regarding the northeast corner and then also the north property line. So just before we get into discussion, can you please just remind everybody why this is the specific location that is being proposed within the 30,000 plus or minus square foot lot? Because I think that would help members of the public understand, just so we can clarify that. And just so you know, Mr. Kubitschek, your audio at the end of your last little minute presentation, it cut out briefly, but right now we can't hear you.
Not hear me?
Oh, now we can. Now we can.
All right.
But now we can't. Do you have headphones you can plug in? We can't hear you.
camera here with and it's got a speaker on it. Who knows how good the speaker is? I mean, the microphone is. Anyway, if you can hear me now, can you hear me? Thumbs up. All right. I just want to make sure I understand your question. You're asking me why the master bedroom is in this location?
Just the house in general. Why is it sided? Because we're looking at siding and massing, right? And
Sure.
so a lot of the comments that we've heard, from people who are not as happy with the project, they're regarding the northern property line and the northeast corner. So if you could just,
can you see my screen?
Yes.
Can you see my screen? Okay. Yes. So the pavement for Hanson Drive is right here, and I needed to bring my driveway onto the site at the lowest possible location. This is where the edge of the pavement is. However, this is where the property line is, which forces my 25-foot setback to be all the way back here. It would be impossible to have a garage that faces towards the street in this location because of the severity of the topography in this area and how far I have to bring the house down or how far I have to bring the driveway down to get to this. It's impossible to go and meet this and meet a height restriction that the city of Lafayette imposes on us. So really, we are ending up with almost 40 feet from the edge of pavement to where the building starts, just by virtue of the fact of staying right up against the required 25-foot setback. In addition to that, this area here is very steeply sloped. And that area is over the 30% slope area where you as a commission and as a city, we are not allowed to put a home on a hillside when we're doing a phase 1 application. So the area of the site that is within the required allowable 30% is where we have placed the house. I can't build in this area according to your documents. So I have to bring the driveway down and create a logical place for cars to turn around and emergency vehicles to feed into the house as well. Turn the car around and get back out because it's too steep of a driveway to back out. So we have to create an area for cars at the bottom of the driveway and then the garage beyond that. Remember, I cannot build in this area. It's over 30% slope. So that's what drives the location of this house. I've tried to keep the house as close up to the top as I possibly could. The new design that I've had, which is the black line here that you're looking at today, is brought up to the point where it's almost kissing the edge of the driveway where I can still get into the garage. But what I've done is I've pulled that master bedroom corner back 26 feet, where it used to be 19 feet, 18.7, something like that. It's now 26 feet from the property line. And I've pulled it back this direction 12 feet beyond where it was in our initial application, which in turn softened this corner, which is what the commission was asking me to do. And so
I think that was helpful for the siting. And then regarding the eastern portion of the site, is that also more than 30%?
Portion, this area, are you saying this area down here?
Yeah.
That area is a natural drainage swale. So
and that's why there's no development proposed right there. What I'm trying to just help facilitate here is just a clear communication of why the siding is being proposed specifically right here.
So this is a natural drainage swale. And then we have trees also, tree canopies through here. We have tree canopies through here as well. So when we look at where the 30% slope is, or it's 30% or less, this is the area where it is. And that's how the house ended up where it did.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions from members of the commission for the applicant's team before we bring it to deliberation or discussion? Commissioner Maggio? And then then Vice Chair Lavange.
Thank you, Chair. Question for Mr. Kublicek. If I could see the elevation, God, it was 2- something. It was the north, back. Okay. It was a block form. It was shown earlier in the presentation.
3D.
There we go. Thank you. So we've got 48, 4B original submittal. We're coming up to 4A. And then we have 4, which is the most recent design. Is that correct?
These three drawings are intended to show you the evolution of how we have
Right.
got to this corner. Yes.
Okay, so what we're seeing though, see on this elevation is it still looks to me in this elevation as a sheer wall. Is that correct?
Oh, no, not at all. So
So
there's,
I need to see something that shows more articulation.
and of course, these drawings are intended for the planning commission and not the design review board. They're not detailed out and they're not.
Sure,
the materials aren't shown. But this drawing here shows
Okay.
better what we're doing. So this is the lower floor.
Uh-huh.
The red is where we were with our initial submittal. The blue is
Okay.
when we pulled it back the first time, and the black is where we are today.
Okay, great. Okay,
And
that
then this drawing here, Ms. Maggio, this is where we our initial submittal. This is where we went last time, and this is where we are today.
fantastic. Thank you. That was very helpful.
Is that it, Commissioner Maggio? Any other questions?
That answers my.
Okay, thank you. Vice Chair Labange?
Oh, actually, that was very helpful. I had the colors backwards, so I thought the neighbors to the south, I'm sorry, to the north, when they were speaking, said it got closer to them. So the way I'm looking at this, maybe they were mistaken. Could you comment on that? Because from what you showed, when you showed the plan view, it stepped back. When you show this north elevation, it steps back. It looks like to me it's gotten farther away.
So if I could reference this drawing for you, Commissioner Labange, the red is where we were initially with our first submittal. It was out here. This line here represents the lower floor. Okay. Pulled in our second submittal, we pulled it back to the blue line. So see where the blue
hold on
line
a
is
second.
here.
Which way is north here? I'm turned now. Is it north to left?
Andersons are over here. This is their property line right here, and they're sitting. I don't know if you can see where my whole quote or not, but where can you see where my cursor is right now?
Yeah, the north is left in this view.
They're way up here. They're way over here. This is their property line. So if I could, let me just give you, I just want to get everybody oriented properly. If we look at this drawing right here, their house is right here.
Right, okay.
This is the beginning of their property line right here. They're sitting right there. So they're looking up at the house this way, which is why Ms. Maggio wanted to look at these drawings again of the three-dimensional. And the reason I did these is actually from the vantage point of what they're seeing and how we have modified that view to pull it back to soften this corner, which is what I believe the Planning Commission was asking us for.
So could you just go back to the plan elevation that shows how you cut back with the north when it's facing north is up? That one is throwing me because I think north is left here.
North is left.
Do one of the ones where
north is left.
Okay. All right. Could you go to one of the ones that just shows more of the building roof line, kind of with north being up, with a little better perspective?
Can you see the north arrow right here?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's my north arrow. North is that direction. Is off to the left. Okay. So when we look at this north elevation here, this is the north elevation, and this is how we pull it back. And on the east elevation, this is how we pull it back.
Hold on a sec. You had one. Sorry, this is.
No worries. I've got all the time.
I'm trying to. All right. So, okay, maybe go back to the one you had, which was A41. I'm pulling it up on mine now. So red was and this is at the lower level, right? What about the upper level?
This is the upper level. 4-1 is the upper level.
Oh, this is the upper level. Okay. So red was the initial, and then blue was the revised, and now we're at basically the black.
Black, yes.
Okay. So then just so I'm not trying to pit you against the neighbors, do you think they were mistaken when they said that it's actually closer now than it was before?
Not sure if that's what they said. I didn't hear them say that, but we are certainly not closer than we were before. We're much further away.
Yeah, I don't think you are. You seem like you pulled it back a little. Okay. All right, thank you.
We pulled it back a lot. And we reduced the square feet, 750 square feet as well.
Could you go to sheet, hold on, it's generating. It's A65 and A65 and then section 3 on the lower right hand side. Okay, so could you show us where that section is in a plan view? Because this is showing that's their house to the right. Is that correct?
3425. This is their house right here.
Oh, I thought you said they were, okay, maybe I have my sections in the wrong spot.
Oh, there it's section 1, not section 3. This one is in relationship to the Anderson's neighbor. And this one is in relationship. It's the same section, but this section happens between the two properties. So therefore I've got and this is a misrepresentation because it's actually their house is much in front of, it's not a direct straight line. These sections are very, very challenging to get right. If you look at my section line here, here's our house, here's their house. That section line is actually jogging. And so all that's showing is the relationship in height, not distance, because the section line jogged. Here's their house, here it jogs up, and then it goes through here. They're very challenging when you have topography to figure out what they are, which is what I did the 3D.
You rotate. Okay, hold on. when your view is rotated on that, could you? So let me ask you, the Andersons, right? What's their address? Are they 45?
Anderson's at
4325?
Anderson's in 3425.
3425. Okay. And then, so could you show me in that section? The reason I'm asking is this section 1 in front of you is when we were at our last meeting. This is the one that I had the heartburn with, and because you know, one of the findings, and I'll have to pull it up to figure out so I don't misrepresent. Give me 1 second, I will. It talked about, you know, is the scale out of character, and to me, it was looking up at a wall. Now, I will say you have dampened it a little, so there's some, you know, I applaud you for that. I mean, it'd be easier if they liked it, you know, then I think we'd all say, okay, it's great, but somewhere in between their concerns and your concerns, we have to find an answer. So I'm still trying to struggle with seeing the section 1. Could you go back to where you showed the section 1 line relative to 4325? But I hope the view you have has them north, because they're north of you, right?
Yeah, but this drawing is drawn north is to the right. North is to the right.
I got you.
Yeah, St. Mary's Road.
Right. You've had north to the right, north to the left, and north up. So that, I mean, I am an actual engineer, and I would think that the convention should always be north is the same direction, but I understand now. So section 1, you're saying is right there, it shows it, and you said it had to jog a little?
See how the section is actually jogging right here? So the diagonal distance is actually much more than what the section is showing.
So you're saying that they're actually closer than the section 1 shows?
Further away than what the section 1 shows. That section is showing the relationship of this to this. It's not taking into consideration the diagonal.
So right there, it says 58 feet. Is that correct?
Right.
That 58 feet's at a, you know, maybe at 10 degrees and, you know, kind of just taking a wild guess. So if you go back to that section 1, 10 degrees means 58 is maybe not okay. So if we were looking at this and trying to make sense of it, that lower 3425 is the west edge of their house to the east edge of your house, and then 10 degrees off of that.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate it. That's helped me understand it a little more. Those are the questions I have for you. Thank you.
And Chair Labonte, I just want to add that 3425 and 3427 St. Mary's are neighboring homes, and they both kind of sit at the fairly similar elevation. 3427 is the one that's directly sort of sits next to the proposed structure.
Could you say that again with pointing to them on a map so I could see what you're talking about?
Yes. Yeah. So what he's saying is this is our house. This is 3425 and this is 3427.
Right.
They're both at a similar elevation because they both front on
Right.
St. Mary's, which is relatively level.
Yeah, I got you. I just think the 3427, they seem to be pulled up closer just because of the geometry of where they are on their lot.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions for the applicant's team? Okay, thank you. Great, and we can bring it to the commission for discussion. And I will open it up. We'll start with Commissioner Sturm and then Commissioner Parson.
I just wanted to start by saying that I completely appreciate all of the positive aspects mentioned by the applicant's team and the public comment in favor of the project. And I personally just wanted to clarify that the city and the planning commission use a framework of findings, zoning code, and residential guidelines to evaluate and judge all projects. So while we completely appreciate hearing any personal details people want to share, and we love having, great people in the community. Like when we're looking at a project, we look at all projects the same. It doesn't matter who the applicant is or who's going to live in the project. Or something looking at this project and evaluating against these planning tools that the city has put in place. So I just wanted to be clear about that. So when I was looking at the project, the two things, and I know the findings that were listed in the staff report pertaining to the general plan policy. For me, those are not two of the findings that I was having an issue with. The two things that I was having an issue with are related more to the residential design guidelines. And number one was essentially how the neighbor that's the most affected by this project described it, that excuse me, when you look at the topography, we generally want to see development in the hillside having homes oriented in the lower sloped parts of the site and running with the contours in a way that decreases the mass and decreases the grading and excavation needed as much as possible. So at the very beginning of looking at this project, that was the part that was really hard for me to wrap my head around. And I appreciate the designers going through his problem solving process as he did the initial schematic design for the project, and that makes sense to me. In a perfect world, I think I would have liked to see the house oriented more east-west as much as possible without, creating another conflict with the drainage swale and the tree canopy. And I haven't looked at it in as much detail, obviously, as the applicant's team, so maybe they did the best they could, but just in judging it against the topography and how we generally want to see houses laid out in the Hillside Overlay District, it's counter to that, and that's the crux of the issue that's creating the issue for the neighbor. And again, like I said last time, landscaping is great, but I mean, for that neighbor, having a house right there so tall is an issue that's, once it's there, it's not going to be mitigated by landscaping. That said, I do think that the fact that the neighbor is not directly behind the house is a good thing. I did not have a problem so much with the overall square footage. I've been looking mostly at siding and massing, so that's what phase 1 focuses on. But I do appreciate that in decreasing the square footage, I do think that northeast corner is much better than it was before. I think with the roof line, that's the kind of profile that I like to see in the Hillside Overlay District. I think that matches one of the do's in the residential design guidelines. It's a much softer corner. So I'm happy to see that, and that makes it, that helps me get more comfortable with the project. And yeah, and I'm not sure actually I want to hear what the rest of the commission has to say, but in terms of, I feel better about that corner. I guess I still feel, maybe the word is, a little frustrated that the applicant, didn't investigate a more east-west orientation to the home. Even just like just a quick study just to show us what that might look like and why it didn't work. It sort of felt like they came up with one plan and they never really directly addressed like the massing being exacerbated by the relationship of the plans of the topography. I think that's all I have right now.
Okay, thank you. And yeah, that's specifically why I asked the question about the siding and why this location was selected. I too would have liked to see that. Commissioner Farson?
Thank you, Chair. I'll make it very quick and I won't be as articulate as Mr. Storm was there. The last time this came up, I actually voted against the denial because I thought that the applicant had made enough changes to satisfy the entire community except for one. And again, I understand where the Andersons are coming from. And even since that meeting, they've made further changes and moved it back a little bit further to hopefully, obviously not satisfactory to the Andersons. But again, I think they've done as much as possible. I understand a different view of putting it on there. And I appreciate the question that you asked about why they decided to cite it the way they did. It kind of gives me some context here into that decision making. But as I said during the last meeting, it's the same thing for me. I'm in favor of this project moving forward. And I could have made the findings the last meeting then, and I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you. Any other commissioners? Hi, Commissioner Maggio.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, first of all, I want to say that I completely agree with Commissioner Strum's assessment of the siding and massing. She is an architect, and I think there was a missed opportunity in this particular project. I think there's a better design out there, and I'm sorry that maybe we don't have that, but I think a lot has been done, particularly this last time around. I think we were disappointed after the first couple meetings that there wasn't enough articulation, that most of the building was slung over to that northeastern corner, providing, quite a steep wall. And we were really hoping to get that pushed in. And I think this last go around, we did see a lot more articulation. But I just wanted to make a couple comments, and, they come up periodically, and I just wanted to address them. And one is the FARs. I think they're entirely appropriate on flat commercial lots. But when you're dealing with a hillside lot where a fair amount of a larger percentage of it is not buildable, there's over 30% grade, there's drainage swales, I really can't go to an FAR and compare that to other properties, because there's sections of that lot that just simply aren't buildable. So I really hope we don't see a lot of those comparisons again in the future, because they're really a waste of time. Also, the reference to the staff not approving or recommending, recommending. I think the Planning Commission has been consistent throughout in their comments from the first hearing to where we are right now. And I think that's what's important. We've got the vote and we have been consistent, and we have been looking for some movement on that northeast elevation, which I think we are finally seeing. So I really appreciate that. With reference to size, really less important. It all has to do with how it sits on the property, how it sits on the topography, and how it relates to the neighborhood. So I think that's where we've really been pushing the design change. So removing a bedroom on an elevation we don't care about just to reduce the square footage is less important to me than reducing that visual impact on that northeast elevation. So those were all the things that were swirling in everybody's letters and everybody's conversations. But really for me now, finally pulling back 6+ feet, so we're not seeing this 45-foot shear wall, is probably the most important improvement that I think has been made so far. So thank you very much for that. And I also want to say, I really want to see Mr. Chopra build his house. I grew up in an environment with 3 generations together, and I just think it's the most ideal way to raise a family. It takes a village, and it's nice to have everybody involved. So I'm hoping we can make that happen for him.
Thank you. Vice Chair Labange?
I agree with everything that's been said. And, you know, the part that I wish we had a clear way to decide would be, how do we say we wish you had a better design versus we really appreciate what you've done and how far you've come? Because they sure have made changes. And I think Commissioner Maggio, on your last point with the wall, when I look at the section view from the last time where I really had a struggle, it was the one that section 1 I was pointing to earlier, to their current one. They definitely made it articulated, and that's really without the final design side. That's just kind of the blocking. So I think they've really done a lot. They did say in their presentation, you know, if there's something you wanted us to do, let us know versus deny, you know, but to say we'll redesign it all, that's a lot to ask. I wish there was a clear way for us to say, you know, you do this, you know, we'll evaluate yes or no, or you redesign. I feel like on this one, you know, the train has left the station and it's a little late now to go back to redesign it. But I guess I'm throwing this out there for other people to think about if there's a way to do it, because, you know, I feel if we said no, you can't do it, they might come back with a design that works better. But I also don't want to put them through the ringer a million times over, you know, and I think, you know, Commissioner Farzan mentioned it, you know, one family who doesn't quite like it. And, you know, we try to appreciate everyone's view here. So, you know, how much is one voice versus, you know, one family's wallet, you know, keep spending and spending and spending. It's very hard to adjudicate that difference. And so I'm frustrated. I will say, having said all that, I feel like they've pulled back enough and made enough changes that I could support it. I would hope that we provide some guidance to DRC to do everything they can in their purview to you know, help with articulation and landscaping and things that could further make it, you know, something that once it's done and built, and, you know, if we're ever invited over to the Anderson's house and we're out in the backyard and we look up, we don't go, oh my God, what were we thinking? You know, because that's the only time you're really going to know is when it's done. So that's where I am on it.
Thank you. Commissioner Mason?
Yeah, I'd like to just kind of echo what Commissioner Labange and Commissioner Maggio said. For most of us, I don't think it was the square footage per se. It was the mass just from that one elevation. I think that as a design professional myself, I'm not going to go back and revisit earlier decisions. I thought that maybe perhaps you could have gotten the square footage you wanted and kept the visual impact the same or less. But, I think it's past that. For myself, I was a little bit disappointed that it seemed like the whole process was, well, we denied the first time, so let's just take a couple hundred square feet off and come back with something that looks substantially the same. And, we did it again and came back and finally got something which nobody really likes. But, it's ideal. It's, it is what it is. I know we are hesitant as a commission to give out hard and fast guidelines. I personally don't think that's our responsibility, but if we could have found some way to cut this process short and get from meeting 1 to meeting 4, I think everybody would have been a lot happier. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Mason. And just basically, I'll echo everything that's already been said. I think Commissioner Maggio articulated it really well. I also, first I'd like to start by saying I do appreciate the applicant's team. It was my comment who had requested that if we were to see it again, it's very, very helpful to see the different iterations and different colors. So thank you. I do wish this was the second submittal and not the fourth. Based off the type of comments that the commission provided in the first hearing on this item, this is what we were looking for. And I do believe that if this is what we would have received the second time, that we'd be at an even better project today, seeing it for the fourth time. So for example, in the second hearing, when I want to say, I don't remember if it was 200 square feet or so, it was a portion of the project that was being proposed inside of the Hillside. So I guess it's on the south side. When that was removed to decrease the overall square footage, I honestly wish that was back now and that the northeast corner on the lower level was shifted back. In my mind, that's what we were looking for. I'm also looking on my other screen here at L10 in the landscaping plan, and where it's showing yard, I can't tell what the symbol is, but maybe a lawn area or something, patio area. In my mind, I also wish, and this goes along with Commissioner Stern's comment, and also my question of why this house is being cited here specifically, I feel like the house could have been a little wider, east to west, and not encroached as far north. But I am not an architect, so yeah, I personally don't struggle with the land use policies that were presented in the staff report. I struggle with some of the other findings, or I had struggled with the other findings. The one specifically is for the single family residential structure so designed that does not unreasonably reduce the privacy or views of adjacent properties. This will be, something that design review looks at. Yeah, I guess I'm just frustrated. I think there could have been a much better project being proposed, but I do believe that this version of the project finally addresses some of the comments that we have been providing the whole time. So, and any type of change and any type of development on undeveloped parcels is really, really hard. We see it on all sorts of different sites across the city. And I think all members of the community are great. And we're lucky that great members of the community are always the ones presenting applications. So like Commissioner Sturm said, we look at them all evenly, no matter who is proposing. So with that, does anyone feel strongly they would like to make a motion? Is there anything else anyone would like to say after hearing other commissioners' comments? Commissioner Sturm?
This is probably not incredibly helpful to wrapping this up, but I just wanted to make two clarifying comments. In terms of when Commissioner Labange was saying, we definitely want to help people. I mean, we want to have this process to be as pain-free as possible. We want projects to be able to move along. And when projects come, when you're at the planning approval step of your project, you're typically at like schematic design or design development. So you're not that far, and usually you're not that far into the details of your project. So that's why we have this phase one hillside, siting and massing, because that's when it's supposed to be done. So I think the frustration here, it feels like the project, I guess maybe the resistance from the applicant to massage the design made us feel like things were sort of set and they didn't have the ability to do that. But it's totally appropriate for us to talk about the orientation of a project in terms, in relationship to topography in this review process, because that's when it happens. And then the other comment I wanted to make in response to some of the applicants' comments is I think while like I was referencing the different planning documents that we use that are meant to make this process as objective as possible, even though it is a discretionary review. I mean, obviously there's some subjectiveness in each of us evaluating and judging the project against each of these planning documents. So like, for example, in the zoning code, you have your side setback, but just because you're within that setback doesn't mean that it's not in our purview to look at the height and distance of that house to an adjacent neighbor that's downslope. Like, even though you're in the overall height allowed in this part of the zoning code, doesn't mean that we're not looking at the height of your building and against the topography and the neighbor's perspective. So all of that is within our purview, and so we should be looking at those things. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Motion? Commissioner Maggio?
Thank you, Chair. So will this project be going forward to design review if we approve it this evening? Staff?
Yeah, it's trying to.
Yeah.
Hello.
I'll help you. So we don't have a resolution for approval at this meeting. So if you do decide you want to approve this project, similar to the last meeting, it would be a recommendation for staff to prepare an approval resolution for the next consent calendar. And I believe in that resolution, there's a mechanism through which you can provide feedback or criteria for design review commission's review of the phase 2 application for this development. Is that correct, Renata? Okay.
Yeah, so in that, as part of that resolution, you can provide conditions for specific items that you would like the design review commission to consider and incorporate in their review of a phase 2 hillside permit.
So for further articulation of the bulk and mass, looking at window fenestration, things of that nature.
So if it were to be the bulk and mass, I would be a little bit more specific about the area of particular concern. So they have that direction, but they'd be looking at the window materials, overall design aesthetic as part of their review. So if there's a specific item, you could call that out in a condition.
Do we have any limitation on how many meetings in design review for this project should we forward it to design review?
So the main limit on number of meetings for this kind of project would be the Permit Streamlining Act deadline. So we have a 60-day review period for hearing, for applications. And then it can be granted if there's a mutually agreed upon extension, that can also add time for review.
Okay, and when are we hitting our deadline?
For this application, I believe it already passed, but the applicant has continued to work with the city on it, on their application. Is that correct, Josh?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, so that's a little tricky. So denial is simple. We deny the project and that's it. So we approve the project. The applicant would have to approve the additional time with DRC. It wouldn't be something that we could require.
So the phase 2 would be a second Hillside development permit application. And so it's considered separately from this phase 1.
Okay, great.
Sorry, that was not clear.
No, perfect.
The process starts again with phase 2.
I just wanted to look at all the different scenarios. So thank you very much, Renata. That answers it.
And just to piggyback on that, Renata, I believe in a previous meeting, we had asked, so the project, let's just say we prepare a resolution for approval, say the project gets approval, goes on to design review. We then have the choice that we'd have to write into our resolution of if we wanted it to come back to us after design review or not, right? Otherwise, typical would be on a more general level, you go to planning commission, then to design review, and then it wouldn't necessarily come back unless we specifically request it.
Correct. And there's and within that, there's a couple options too. You could designate a member of the planning commission to review it instead of the full body to make sure they represented the commission's intent, or it could come back to a planning commission meeting on a future agenda.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Do we have any other discussion items? One thing I did like the idea of, I don't know if this would be possible. Renata had just mentioned, maybe someone can review. Would Commissioner Sturm, totally to put you on the spot as an architect, would anyone, I guess maybe from the commission, be interested in being that review person? Or Renata, is it a review that then it comes back to someone at the planning commission, or is that planning commissioner kind of a liaison that sits in on the design review meetings?
I think typically they could attend. I'd have to check on that specifically, but I think the condition could read simply as review by a planning commissioner and be specific about like what stage in the process that would happen. But if whether or not they're on the commission meeting, the design review commission meeting, or if it's outside of the hearing, I think obviously for transparency, best to hold things in the public setting, but we can figure out the details on that as well.
Okay, thank you. So what I'm kind of getting consensus on, or what I'm hearing, is that Commissioner Farsan is still consistent with his thoughts from the way he voted in the last hearing on this item. But I will reverse it. He would support the project and not support the denial, right? Because now we have the reverse here. I hear generally from the other commissioners that it would have been great if this was a project we did see earlier on, but that there were noticeable changes that were made specifically to areas of the project that we had been requesting, throughout the last couple meetings. We've heard public comment in support of the project. We've heard public comment against the project. And it sounds like our choice now to help facilitate, moving forward, to help move things along, is we can adopt the resolution, which would be for denial, or we could make some suggestions to the applicant's team to bring back, or we can ask staff to prepare a resolution for approval for the next meeting. I personally don't think we should ask for changes to come back. I think 4 hearings is already too many, and I think our comments, not to be negative, but I don't know if they're going to be heard any differently. And it's taken 4 meetings to get to this point. So with that, but that's just my personal opinion. But I do see those as the 3 options, and with the caveat of if we choose to write up an approval or ask staff to draft an approval resolution, we do have the option of reviewing or asking a planning commissioner to review or provide input on design reviews, recommendations. So with that, I will welcome a motion.
Can I ask a question? I apologize. And again, big caveat here. I feel like I'm more confused now at the end than I was at the beginning. So
sorry.
No offense to you. I'm just saying as a whole, because it seems to me, aren't we, again, hypothetical here, aren't we essentially, if we're going to approve it, saying we're approving the new design, please write a resolution approving the new design? Am I missing it? Because I know we've had additional comments, but I don't know if those additional comments are actually going to be incorporated in any way. I think this was like their final, here you go.
You're correct. And so what I was meaning is we can uphold the denial resolution right now and vote in favor of the denial resolution. We can ask staff to bring an approval resolution based off of the project that was presented tonight. The drawings, I want to say, were dated 4/7. I think I saw at the top. And then the third option would be to, as Mr. Moore had mentioned, he said, if there's any tweaks you would want to see, those would be tweaks we'd ask them to bring back, which is what I am not advocating for, even though it would have been great 2 rounds ago. So it's, I view it as we ask staff to bring an approval resolution for what we specifically saw tonight that was presented, dated 4/7 on the drawings, or we vote in favor of the existing resolution, which is a denial. Does that help?
Yes, thank you for the clarification. I appreciate that. And if it means anything, I'm in favor of number 2, an approval resolution based on the new renderings, so to speak. And I'll add one other, I'm not making a motion, I'm just giving you the straw polling here. I also probably am not really in favor of appointing somebody to look over the shoulders of the design review. I think we're different bodies. They know what they're doing as well as we know what we're doing. So again, I'm just putting that out there. I just think that's probably an extra step that's not necessary, but I'll leave that for the whole group. That's kind of where I am. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's a good point too, because something Renata did mention was clarification from Commissioner Maggio's comment is that in our resolution, we can add direction to design review of just clear statements on what we are hoping to see through design review or areas that we would like them to focus on. Okay, thank you. I'll just start. I do agree with Commissioner Farzan. I think we could have a better project in front of us. We don't. but all property owners have a right to develop their parcel, and any new development on an undeveloped parcel is hard to envision. Unfortunately, the topography from St. Mary's Road south is steep, and it's going to be noticeable for any development to be there. If we do propose a resolution for approval to be prepared, I would like that we specify to design review that we would like to see any improvements they can help make on the northeast portion, as well as the north boundary as a whole. But that's where I also sit. Any of the commissioners or a motion? Vice Chair Labange?
I move that we direct staff to come back with an approval resolution as presented tonight with, staff, with PC comments that we would like the DRC to be extra mindful of the northeast corner and anything they can do to de-emphasize the overall height.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion by Vice Chair Labange that staff prepare a resolution for approval with some other additional detail.
Second.
Okay.
No, sorry, go ahead.
Okay, so motion by Vice Chair Labange, a second by Commissioner Sturm, and we'll move to a roll call vote. Commissioner Farsan,
Aye.
Commissioner Maggio,
Aye.
Commissioner Mason,
Aye.
Commissioner Sturm,
Aye.
Vice Chair Labange,
Aye.
and Chair Radnich. Aye. So Renata, I assume that gives you and Joshua, does it give you enough information to prepare? Okay. Or
Yeah. I was just going to unmute. Just to confirm, I will draft an approval resolution, and I'll include in that resolution certain instructions and insights from PC to DRC to examine in the project, specifically concerning the north and east elevations.
Perfect. Thank you.
Excellent.
Okay. So it's 8:47. We do have another item here under continued public hearing. It's original item 6A, so it's HDP 32-21 Delamar. This is a request for hillside development, siding and massing, design review approval, grading permit, tree permit. So tonight we're going to be conducting a public hearing on this item, and we're asked to provide direction to the applicant and continue the item. So I do know we typically take a break at about 2 hours in. If it's okay, Renata, I would like to suggest we take just a 5-minute break now, and then that way we can move forward with the item, unless people want to just charge through. But if we need a 5-minute break, I think we should do it now before we start the item. So, okay, 5-minute break. So it's 8:48. Maybe we can come back at 7-minute break, 8:55. Thank you. Okay, welcome back. 8:56. And we can go ahead and resume the meeting. Commissioner Mason, are you there? Perfect. Perfect. Okay, all commissioners are back, staff is back. So we're now moving on to continued public hearing. HDP 32-21, Todd Delamar, so in the R20 zoning. And again, just as we had said right before the break, tonight we'll be reviewing the proposed project. We'll conduct a public hearing and we will provide direction to the applicant and continue the item to a future date to give the applicant time to respond to our comments tonight. So with that, I will welcome Josh. Joshua, I assume you have a presentation. Thank you.
One second, let me just orient myself. Switch some gears. You get a double feature with me tonight, so hope you enjoy. Let me quickly pull up the presentation. So present mode. And I'll share my screen. Share slideshow. Everyone can see the title page.
Yes, thank you.
Excellent. So tonight we are hearing HDP 32-21, as Chair Radnich said. Todd Delamar is the applicant and the property owner. This is a phase 1 Hillside development permit to construct a new 3,646 square foot, 2-story single-family residence, including a garage with a maximum ridge height of 31 feet on a currently vacant parcel in the Hillside Overlay District. The parcel is located at the end of Los Erebus Drive. This portion is a private easement, and the property is located right here on the side. This is a picture taken in, I believe, mid-October, and this is a more recent picture with the story poles installed. This was taken in February of 2022, and the site, as you can see, there is a large slope up from the easement paved road, and it slopes up continuously all the way to the rear. And the applicant is proposing to build a, in their parlance, a multi-level 2-story home. So these 3 levels are terraced off of each other. And here are some renderings for context. The driveway would start at the corner to compensate for the slope of the property for fire access and general vehicular access, and would come up here. And there would be a driveway, a slight turnaround for the Y here, and then the garage stairs up, first, second story. This is a view taken from this area of Los Erebus, looking up at it. And then this is a view from the bottom of the driveway looking up. These renderings are provided by the applicant in the plan set. In terms of, here's some more renderings and drawings. This is the general massing of the home. This mostly subterranean garage, on top of it terraced comme ça. The first story, and then a smaller second story with a, I believe, the master bedroom. This is one of the site sections looking at the relationship between the 2 properties on either side of it. So 4146 is the closest neighbor, their property and the relative distance, and then 4132, the neighbor on the other side and the relative distance. And there are more renderings to illustrate the relationship. And one component that I do want to discuss is there's some question about the story, not the story of the design, but the story of what constitutes a story, because Lafayette does have some examples of multi-level homes that may appear to be 3-story, but are considered 2-story according to our code. And I actually have an excerpt of the definition from our municipal code for story, and the test is right there spelled out. If the finished floor directly above the basement, cellar, unused underfloor space is more than 6 feet above the ground adjacent to the building for more than 50% of the total perimeter, so essentially is more than 50% of the exposed here, is that, I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. And if a portion that is taller than 6 feet is exposed for more than 50% of the total perimeter of the basement, cellar, or underfloor space, or is more than 12 feet above the ground at any point, such a basement shall be considered a story. So I did a calculation, and one of our senior planners, Nancy Trent, helped me as well. In interpreting this, she helped make sure I had the right numbers and did the calculation for herself as well to help me out. The calculation, if we are looking at the nitty-gritty, is approximately 50.78%. So in the current iteration, the garage would be considered a story, and a 3rd story, which is not allowed in the code for the zoning district. However, this could be modified to become an actual basement floor. Just wanted to elaborate on that component because it will come up in terms of the questions and certain public comments. On a related note, because this was continued, we did not receive any explicit public comments for this agenda item. However, for context, I did include with the staff report all the comments received for the original March 7th scheduled hearing, and staff received a litany of public comments from adjacent neighbors, all of which had concerns about the massing of the property, the relationship of the stories and the floors, as well as visibility and privacy impacts of building on the hillside. And all of them were generally opposed to the existing iteration of the project. And with that, staff recommends that the commission review the project, conduct a public hearing, and continue the application to a date certain to allow for the applicant to respond to feedback concerning the massing and other components, as well as to submit a revised arborist report per the city's consulting arborist's review of the existing one. And that is my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to confuse things more, can you please go back to your slide where you're discussing what's considered a story?
Certainly.
So I believe you said the calculation was 50.87, so slightly over 50%. So that means that would be considered a story, and that this is 3 stories. So one thing we would be looking at tonight, or one, I guess, consideration for the applicant's team already, right, would be how to reduce the percentage to below 50%, correct? Okay.
Correct. That would be a corollary to the massing discussion at hand.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Mason?
Thank you. I had raised this issue with Joshua early, and it's actually it's a 2-part test. So he only addressed the first part, which is 50% more of the total. So What all the height is based off of is the garage slab elevation at 123. But if you look at civil plans sheet C1, it puts the pad grade at 122. And so with the lower level finished floor at 134.10, that puts the second floor more than 12 feet above the ground. So that is the second portion, which fails it as makes it a story. Also, the third, I'm unsure from the building is referenced at 31 feet tall, and again, that is from the garage slab, not grade. And if you go by the civil drawings, again, that makes it 32 feet tall. Again, they're minor distinctions, but they are things that should be addressed. I've got some other comments about the street, but I'll save those till we get these cleared up. Those
Great.
siding and massing.
Yeah, thank you. Are there any clarifying questions for staff? Commissioner Sturm?
So I understood what staff just, what their analysis showed. And I went back to the staff report. So did the applicant say it was do the same calculation and say it was 26%?
I believe the applicant calculated it based on the portion of the first floor that intersects, and the calculation should be based on the perimeter of what would be considered the basement structure. So if the perimeter is approximately 125 square feet of the full basement, and then this is approximately 37.8 and then 25.3. So doing the calculation of the relationship of those two came out to approximately 50.78. And of course, this isn't through like AutoCAD, and that's not an explicitly like snap point measurement of it, but it's reflective of what's in the plan set that was submitted. So that number would need to be reconciled with the definition of the story, and then would need to be revised, and the plans would need to be changed to comply with the 2.5 story limit that is in our code.
Okay. What? So I don't quite understand. I understand the first part about the distance above the ground level, and following that around the perimeter of each story. If the story, I mean, given that we want to see buildings that step with the hillside, maybe I missed this when you were going through your explanation earlier, but how does the overlapping work? Because what would be the top story has no overlapping with the garage, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
So
I'm sorry, go ahead, Commissioner.
Go ahead. So my question is about, there's the height issue, and then there's like a stacking issue, and I just wanted to be clear about how the code defines the stories with given stacking.
Yeah, so there are, similar to the test that Commissioner Mason mentioned for what's a story, within the code for the zoning district in terms of maximum height, there are two thresholds. One is 35 feet and one is 2.5 stories. So the way those two relate, for this home, the total height of it in its stacked form from lowest to highest is 31 feet in their dimensioning. And then the question turns to, if the two living areas are the two floors, the garage basement component, that cannot be considered a floor in its own right, because then that would make a 3-story building, and that component is not allowed in the height limit for the zoning district. Does that get to your question?
I think so, yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Mason, is your hand up from before, or do you have another question for staff?
Actually, I have another question. Getting back to the whole concept of ground, again, back to the pad grade. How is that, what establishes, because, okay, I can see for the garage slab, say a 5-inch slab, 4-inch rock, 123 less 9 inches, the 22, but you're going to have a large, it's kind of a large footing across the back of the wall, and that essentially pushes pad grade, what, 2 feet down below top of slab at the rear of the garage and at the side of the garage. And since we're going to be fighting inches here, and as I see that, I don't, without the floor plan, I can't see that the first level rear window. I can't raise grade there. Otherwise you lose that window. Then that whole garage has to be lifted up. And I'm just trying to get a feel. Does it have to be lifted up a foot? Does it have to be lifted up 2 feet? But that depends on what you define as grade. It just says lowest of finish grade.
Commissioner Mason, are you done with your question?
Yes, sorry, thank you.
Perfect. Just want to make sure I don't cut you off. In the definition of story, staff is interpreting it based on the finished floor level. So I believe the finished floor level is 1 foot higher than the slab that's in the engineering drawings. So with the first floor level elevation measurement, that is how staff interpreted the 12-foot threshold. Additionally, in a previous iteration of the plans, the garage window was actually more like a standard 2-pane window, and the applicant revised it to be the skinnier, slimmer window. I think the applicant would be favorable to, if they need to adjust the grade, to remove that window and to help it comply with the story definition. I think they would be amenable to doing that. I think there are multiple iterations that the applicant could go through to make it comply. It's just a matter of demonstrating it and which one is most optimal for the massing and siting of this property.
Sorry, I'm still confused here because from your excerpts right above, it says 6-354, and it's also duplicated on 6-313. It says 12 feet above ground. And ground I would consider as grade, not top of slab. And 6-313 says lowest of finished grade or natural grade around the perimeter. So can you kind of clear that up, please?
Certainly. So 6-313 refers to how the building height is measured. So the building height, that would pertain to the height component in the height limit, which is 35 feet. So 6-313 would inform us how to measure the building height of the property from, in this case, it is the average of the highest and lowest grade of the lowest foundation wall at existing or finished, whichever is lower, to, in this case, the highest point of the fly roof, deck line, mansard roof, etc. So the height is one definition and measurement based on the grade. And then the definition of story specifically points out the finished floor level. So there are two distinct qualifying factors at play between when we measure a story and when we measure a height. Does that add some clarifying information?
I'm sorry to keep beating this up because I see finished floor level as the reference for the established height of the floor above. But here it refers to 12 feet down the third line down, 12 feet above ground. So the question is to me, that would imply 12 feet above grade, not 12 feet above garage slab, because otherwise they'd say 12 feet from finished floor to 12 feet from finished floor below to 12 feet to finished floor above. But that's not what it says. So I guess that's why I'm still confused.
Okay, I see. Okay, so in this sense, above ground, and I would definitely check in terms of what that refers to, because as we've discussed previously with some of these terms, there's really specific qualifying factors, and here it's just ground. It may, in this case, be grade in terms of exterior ground to whatever that height is. It may be that the language for this component of the story definition is a little bit more vague in terms of just using ground and not defining which ground is the ground, which is weird to say, but nevertheless, what we deal with. So I would be happy to consult with my fellow staff members about that, and the applicant can definitely provide more contextual information on the relationship with the garage for both of those tests. The first one being the 50% threshold, and that second one being the 12 foot from ground threshold.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry to belabor this point, but the first thing we always get is the buildings are too tall, buildings are too tall. And then from your previous exhibit, it also seemed to indicate 31 feet from the garage slab to the top of roof, not 1 feet from 123 to whatever, I can't read it, top plate.
I apologize, I can't see the zoomed in. I believe that might be 153. I can't tell with the line for the dimension across. But the applicant can definitely provide much more supplemental dimensioning measurements to make the plans legible for the commissioners to understand them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for staff before we hear the applicant's presentation? Okay. Commissioner Mason, your hand isn't up, right? Okay, just wanted to make sure. Okay, Joshua, if we can please welcome the applicant's team.
Yes, so we have the property owner and applicant, Todd Delamar. We have his architect and lead designer, Donna Chivers, and we have another person representing Mr. Delamar, Jill McGovern.
Welcome. When everyone on your team, whoever's going to be speaking, is here, you're welcome to start, and you'll have 10 minutes for your presentation.
Okay. Jill and Todd, are you going to turn on your video? Oh, there we go. Okay, my name is Donna Chivers. I am an architectural designer working with Todd Delamar. Thank you so much for allowing us the time to review the revised drawings and plans that we did in response to the first set of staff comments. So specifically, we'll be talking about, and we did address the site location. We did do some drawings to indicate vertical massing. We'll talk about privacy, windows and landscaping, the new arborist report, grading and drainage, and then I'm not sure if Chris Bachman is still in attendance. wanted him to address fire safety, which we did have a meeting with the neighbors. And if he's still here, we'd love for him to review comments made there. So, and I can share my screen here. Okay. So as far as site location, can everybody see my screen? Yes.
Yes.
So in response to comments made about why the house is placed where it is, if everybody can see this drawing here, the white house and the white driveway represent where the house is located, the optimum location for the house and where it stands in the drawings now. We did look at this pink box here, shifting the house based on neighbor comments and staff requests, shifting the house over a bit to the right to provide more of a centralized location. However, what we found is that we're getting more into the steeper slope of the site. This is about 40% slope in here. This is about 30% slope in here. So currently the house is placed in a natural clearing. It is placed where we are not proposing to remove any trees in order to build the house. The trees that are requested to be removed are in order to build the driveway, but the house is placed in a natural clearing free of trees. And it also allows for Todd Delamar to take advantage of the view of Mount Diablo that this site has from his master suite up on the upper level. If we were to shift the house over to the right a little bit, we would be losing another 2 oaks, a 42-inch oak and I think a 30-inch oak here. I think a 32-inch oak and a 30-inch oak here. So we determined that this was the best placement of the house on the site. We also investigated a different way to come up into the driveway instead of having a longer driveway here, working with Chris Bachman, the fire department. This slope is just entirely too much. We could not get less than a 20% slope on the driveway in order to comply with the fire department code. We are also looking at having to do a hammerhead turnaround for fire safety in the neighborhood. Currently, as we'll see in the C1 drawing, that hammerhead is located at the bottom left of the site. We did look at putting the hammerhead here. We could not get the slope. In addition, there's no driveway across the street in order to complete the hammerhead as there is on this side of the street. So we did determine that this is, along with the fire department, this is the best place to put the hammerhead as well. So that's the reasoning we used in order to place the house on the site there. As far as vertical massing is concerned, we did do a schematic. And so I don't know if Joshua can put his drawing back up as far as the 50%. So even if we were to use the finished floor of the slab at 122, going up to the finished floor of the level above at 134, that still is 12 feet. We don't have any, it's not 134.10, it's 134 feet flat. So it's still 12 feet or below, even if we're not using finished floor levels, even if we're using, the 122. So there's no place calculated in the perimeter of this house where there's a floor level that's 12 feet above finished grade as we've calculated it out. And so in our calculations, this is not a 3-story house. It is a multi-level house that has a lower level garage. There's a mezzanine level, and then there's an upper level as well. In addition, we are well below the 35-foot threshold, and we're really only about 2 feet above our closest neighbor, which is 4146. Their house rises about 29 feet in total height as per public records that are on the Lafayette website there. I'm going to ask Jill to review her sections to talk about how the house is placed and how we designed the foundation to show how we're trying to take advantage of the natural slope and reduce the height of the building, the appearance of the height of the building.
There we go. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So firstly, as you can see from the topography maps, it's a steep slope. First thing we needed to do was figure a way to access the slope from a driveway standpoint that would meet the fire department. And with the restrictions we have from the front setback, the road right-of-way, which was clearly indicated on the map we were just looking at, this is about as close to the street area as we can get and still provide access to the site. So we were very careful in trying to run the house parallel to the contours so that we weren't getting any taller or any more cutting than need be, trying to nestle the house into the hill, create multiple levels. As you can see, the master bedroom does not sit on top of anything. The main living only overlaps the garage in a small area, and that's really only to allow us to get a set of stairways up to access the upper levels. So the house runs parallel with the contours so that we're climbing the hill. We're using a series of smaller landscape retaining walls around the uphill side and on the sides for, there you go, landscaping. You can see how much the garage is buried midway. By the time it's in the back, it's totally beneath grade. And we wanted to be careful of the trees where we could. We are needing to take out some trees for the driveway. There's a small cluster there. And there will be a couple small trees over where the hammerhead needs to be. And this is something we've worked quite a bit with the fire department on getting their input, what they need to do. They're willing to work with us on having half a hammerhead because across the street there is a driveway they can use for the second half of the hammerhead. So you can also see that with our driveway, the red lines around the property show the lengths of hoses. So we've been in close contact with the fire department through all of this and trying to keep our design as close to grade as possible, going with the contours and taking advantage of the natural topography. That also helps with the massing. So when you're looking at it from the side, you're seeing, sorry, Don, I'm going fast.
That's okay.
When you look at it from the two side elevations, you can see how much it is buried into the hill. From the back, you hardly see any of the house. Do you have the architectural elevations in this package? There we are. Okay.
This is the back.
That's the back. You barely see any of the house because the rest is below grade. The windows that we have facing towards 4146 are high windows in the master bedroom. So the bottom of those windows is 6 feet. So they're mostly just for light and ventilation. The two windows to the right of those are clear story windows in the interior stairway. The windows below that are stairway windows going up from the garage. And as Joshua was mentioning, the window in the garage, we can certainly eliminate that if we need to or move it forward. But we took great care to keep the windows not facing our neighbor on that side. On the opposite side, the north elevation, you can see we have a door from the master at the upper level going out to hopefully a small little area. Whoops, there's my time. But we try to be careful and keep our windows facing towards Los Erebus and not our neighbors.
Thank you. I do know there's a 10-minute limit. I do know privacy or comments that we've heard. So I would just welcome if there's any last statements that your team was needing to make around this item. Please do feel free, but please just try to keep it to 30 or 45 seconds if you can.
Certainly. So as you can see from the elevation, none of those windows are windows that anyone's ever going to stand in and look out of. That's the north elevation. There we go. Those are all windows that are up high, out of reach, or in a transitional area like a stairway or a garage. On the north elevation, the two small windows are also in a stairway up high. The lower window that you're seeing there is a bedroom window, but it's tucked behind that wing of the house. And with the way the hillside is, it cannot look at any home from there. So the bulk of our windows are facing Los Erebus. They're in our public spaces and we're facing the street. And that was intentionally done to respect the privacy of all the neighbors. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. Before we open it to public comment, I will ask the commissioners, are there any clarifying questions that you would like to ask of the applicant's team at this time? Commissioner Mason?
Thank you. Could you address the concerns raised about, I wish Bachman was here also, the
I believe
road.
I just saw Chris Bachman. Oh, he is here.
There he is.
Oh, okay. So let me ask the questions and then whoever's most appropriate to, so there's concerns about the road. I went out there today. The road did not look in good shape, especially the downhill side. There were noticeable cracks. As I see it, it's not simple widening. You need a retaining wall on the uphill side, retaining wall on downhill side. You need to relocate 2 telephone poles, relocate a fire hydrant, get new easements, which especially from the downhill side might be problematic. And as far as the turnaround in the Hammerhead turnaround in somebody's driveway, I know I park cars in my driveway, would that require an easement also? And, just looking at it, just the time frame of getting all that done before a permit expires seems to be problematic. And then also, at what point would the road need to be widened? Prior to construction, during construction, prior to certificate of occupancy? How does that whole process work? It's kind of like an open-ended question.
Chris, do you want to take this?
Sure. Let's start with the access with the road. So there are sections where the road is less than 20 feet wide. We did walk that road with the neighbors and address those areas and came to an agreement that there are some areas that we're willing to leave as is, so we're not removing trees along the road because it's strategic enough that there's enough location down that approximately 700 feet of dead end road that there's areas that we have that we can still pull an apparatus and stage it in a location to protect structures and still have room for either occupants to exit and get by us or for another engine to come in to stage. That's the whole purpose of the 20 feet. If we're less than 20 feet, it makes it difficult for us to park our apparatus in one lane and still allow residents to evacuate or leave or additional apparatus to come in. So in those few areas that it does drop down to, I believe, 18 feet, it's not extended. It is a small area and we can be very strategic for those couple locations. A culvert's in plate or is in the way in a couple locations. Another location, it's some large trees, but for the majority of that 700 feet, we're going to be able to meet that 20-foot width. I did offer up our Crew 12 to help with that trimming, and it would be a coordinated effort with each of the neighbors on the areas that we would trim to maintain that 20-foot distance. So it would be at no cost to them. And I'm still working on trying to locate a chipper so we can dispose of the limbs so they don't have to pay to haul them off. But that may be the only caveat that could be an added expense. We like to take the approach that we're all in this together and that we're a stakeholder as well. So that's why we're offering our resources for a hand crew to come in and we'll say improve an evacuation route by getting the buy-in from all the neighbors. When it comes to the actually access of the house. It was addressed that, and you'll notice there's a 150-foot hose pole requirement, meaning wherever we're going to stage our apparatus, if that house is on fire, a max of 150 feet around the entire structure to the most remote wall. And that drawing is on that site location that they're providing that. And I believe they are down to 130 feet max distance for a hose pole where the apparatus could stage on their driveway. The biggest issue that we have struggled with in working with the designer and the engineers and the property owner has been a turnaround. As I mentioned earlier, we're roughly 700 feet down a dead end private road. And how can we have a turnaround that we can safely turn an ambulance around or turn a fire truck around in the event that we need to respond to this area? There is concern because this area is identified as a very high fire hazard severity zone. So we don't look at it as just, well, if there was a structure fire at one of these homes or if an ambulance had to respond. We do need to take a look at it as what if we had to respond an entire task force into this area, which is going to be 5 engines and a supervisor, which is typically a battalion chief. So if we have 6 apparatus that need to get 5 apparatus in one SUV that need to get down to the end of this road, turn around and properly stage to protect structures, we don't want to back up 600 feet to do that, or I should say 700 feet to do that. We want to be able to go to the end of the road, turn around, and position ourselves accordingly. So that's why we request the Hammerhead T at the end of this dead end road. And we did even reduce the size to what we truly need for our apparatus by giving the engineer our actual spec design of our fire engine and saying you can reduce it from what the fire code says. Just make sure that the turning radius and the dimensions provided will meet the bare minimum to turn our engine, which is assigned to station 16, around at the end of this road. So it did reduce it in both length and width to the bare minimum that we need so we can still do an emergency turnaround. Be happy to answer any other questions about the Hammerhead T, the road access, or fire hydrants if you have any.
Sorry, I was just questioning it was made the comment that you were depending upon backing into somebody else's driveway. And I know that, hey, we parked cars in our driveway, and, is that if there are cars parked in the driveway, somebody's on vacation, does that preclude you from using the Hammerhead?
In this scenario, I don't see there typically being cars in that driveway because it's at the top of a hill. There's actually a nice flat spot at the bottom of the hill where they have plenty of driveway. It's just trying to utilize the existing surface that's there with the drives to keep the Hammerhead T to a minimum and only encroach on the property owner who is applying for the permit to build the new construction. So no other driveways have to be modified.
Thank you.
I have a follow-up question to that. How do fire trucks turn around now?
So we were told that they can, that they've been turning around down there for years. And I had our engine 16 come out, and I will share screen. And this, are you seeing the fire engine or are you seeing the property?
Fire engine.
Okay. So the, what is this? So this is when we try to come into the neighbor's driveway and then back. So you'll notice where we're trying to back into is that driveway that we're proposing that we could use the Hammerhead T. If you'll notice that just to the left of the fire engine, if you'll notice on the print, that's the tree that would need to be removed. That's approximately where the Hammerhead T would go. And then we would back down a portion of that driveway to get turned around. Right now, we can't even make a 10 or a 12-point turn. We back in, we were completely pinned, and the only way to get out was to pull forward and then back down that road. Now, there has been comment that The neighbor has allowed engines to drive down into his driveway to turn around before, and that's, I guess, how we've done it for years. In the event that we had multiple engines and a strike team come into that area, what they're going to do is your battalion chief's going to come in, evaluate the area, identify there's no way to properly turn around, and all apparatus are going to have to back in. Because if we're in a wildland scenario that we're protecting structures, we're always making sure that we're faced out. So in the event that we get overrun, we can quickly unhook our hoses and evacuate the area ourselves.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for the applicant's team? Okay, seeing none. Thank you. We'll open it up to public comment, and then after that, the applicant team will have 5 minutes to respond to anything brought up during public comment or anything additional you'd like to share. So Joshua or Renata, are there any public comments?
If you would like to make a public comment on this item, please use the raise hand function at the bottom of your screen. We have one hand raised at this time, which is Julie Haydenfeld. Next will be Christian Mars.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you all. And thank you, Officer Bachman. Thank you for what you've done in terms of working with the neighborhood and trying to help us figure out how to make us safer. The photo that you actually showed with the fire truck at the bottom of the driveway, the pavers that come down to that driveway, that is our driveway. We are 4146. And they're just the comments I have to do with a couple of different comments. One, the Hammerhead Turnaround will absolutely be up to our property line, and we have a designed easement as part of our property as well. And so it will be encroaching into the easement and the property line and going very deep into the side of that hillside right in front of our property. So we will have like a commercial looking design literally in front of our driveway as you approach our home. So that's just something that's not really being brought up. The other part is the photo renderings that are showing the views of the massing and the siding of this home are not at all, I guess, really true to what we see with the story poles. As the property is situated north to south, and it is all the way at the south side of the property. There does seem to be a clearing that goes across the entire north-south of the property, and it could be situated in the middle. If it were a design that was different, that would be in terms of how, you know, I loved in the previous comments when you were talking about how a house should be oriented, how it's centered, how it works with the topography of the land. I feel like this design does not do any of those things. It's sitting right next to and above, completely above our property because of the angle of the home itself. Our entire side of our home and the only outdoor space we have is facing the entire side and the entire mass of the entire home. And the view of it is 100% there from the side of all of the open space of our kitchen, our side decks, and all of the outdoor living space that we have. So it's just in terms of privacy, siding, massing, location, and even the Hammerhead Turnaround, we feel like we're losing a lot of value, privacy, and we have a lot at stake in terms of our home and what makes our home and our neighborhood itself, whole neighborhood special. And we feel like our neighbors as well feel that it's not in line with what this neighborhood represents. And I'll leave it at that.
Perfect timing. Can I ask you, because I have Google Map pulled up here, or Google Earth on my other screen. Are you the property more or less south, kind of the triangular shaped property?
Yes, we are. And it's
Okay.
it's the newer construction. There's some photos that show bushes of an old home. That is not accurate. This house was constructed in 2016.
Okay, and what's the address again?
4146.
4146, thank you. Commissioner Mason? Go ahead, please.
In case, in efforts of full disclosure, if one of your neighbors reported a stranger knocking on your door about 10 this morning, that was me. I was out looking at the site and I was wanted to chat with you because you seem to be the neighbor most closely related to this project.
Oh, okay. No problem.
Any questions for the speaker? Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Next speaker will be Christian Merce, followed by Susan Goldie.
Hi there.
Hi.
Hi, good evening, planning commissioners. My name is Christian Mars. I've lived on Los Arbas for about 25 years. And I definitely want to express some concerns for this phase one siting and massing determination. I'm going to start by quoting the first three guidelines for the Lafayette Residential Design Review. First one says, minimize the visibility of structures and other improvements and to protect views to the hills. Number two, retain natural features of the land. And number three, protect vulnerable habitat and native vegetation. In my opinion, these three basic design requirements for a phase one determination cannot be satisfied for this proposed development. The proposed location for this residence is on one of the worst spots visually on this site. Together with the proposed driveway, it's located front and center on the site and completely contradicts the recommendation of section 2E of the residential design guidelines, where it states, minimize impacts to neighbors' views and privacy. Now that the story poles have gone up, the loss of privacy to the adjacent lots are very clear, especially to 4146. I live diagonally across, and from my rear yard, especially the pool deck, this structure is clearly visible and towers some 80 feet above me. To make matters worse, excessive grading and tree removal is required for the long driveway and the house pads. Consequently, when the trees are removed, I will also get a clear view shot of from the bottom to the top of that proposed driveway and the three massive retaining walls adjacent. I can only imagine what a nighttime experience is going to look like. It will be a beacon on the hill, and cars coming down the driveway will light up the entire neighborhood down below. The massing impact of this three-level home is not in compliance with the massing intent of the R20 zoning code, which limits buildings to 2.5 stories with a maximum height of 35 feet. The half-story portion must be located within the roof space. So visually what they're describing here is a 2-story structure with a pitched roof. From a visual massing evaluation, the proposed structure has 3 levels, which each level stacked vertically on top of the other. Now, I know you guys have been talking about that particular section of the code, but it's pretty clear here to me that this is not meant to be 3 levels stacked on top of one another. Also, the existing homes, there's no 3-story home in this neighborhood. I noted the applicant has provided some addresses. Some of these are quite far away, and some of these are built way before this code came into effect. Just to put this height differential in, I was going to talk about the height of this building. It's approximately 80 feet above where we are down below. So, you know, the California Building Code defines a high rise as 75 feet above grade. So you can imagine what this feels like when we're down here.
Thank you. And what is your address again? Just again, because I've Googled
4131.
4131. Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for the speaker? Commissioner Mason?
Yes, I was out there earlier. how close is your house to the road currently? Because it looked fairly close. And, you know, one of the concerns I had out there was the road above your house. There's some fairly significant cracks, and with the whatever 160 trucks hauling dirt, that if there was a problem and a truck rolled down the hill, it'd roll right into your house, because you don't seem to be that far off.
That's actually the neighbor right adjacent to me, I think you're talking about, which are right opposite. I actually live diagonally across. So what actually happens for me is that where the house is located, it actually swings around. So it actually gets to look straight into my backyard. If you climb up there, you will see it.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Next speaker is Susan Goldie, followed by Matt and Katie, Jaros.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for staying super late. This is so important to our neighborhood, and I kind of reiterate the concerns that Christian has in terms of the massing. And, you know, I understand that perhaps the measurements will meet the code, but when I think about the precedent it sets for the neighborhood, I really do feel like by the time we see the retaining walls and everything that's required for this home, as well as the hammerhead, it's going to look very tall. And having raised both of our kids here and hoping that maybe someday they would have the opportunity to come back and live here in this type of neighborhood as well, where many of the residents have grown up and still live here. We love the wildlife, just the trees that are provided and the habitat for the animals. I feel like what we really need to consider here is also that this property may have the potential for 2 homes ultimately to be built on it, from my understanding. I know that's not being proposed right now, but I do have a concern that when it's situated so far to one side, I just don't know if we're actually contemplating ultimately, will there be 2 homes here? And then how much earth would have to be removed for that? How many trees would have to go? It really changes the feel of the neighborhood, both with the height as well as just the overall feel. I don't see any other, I don't have a problem with the aesthetics of the home itself, but when I consider the whole thing situated where it really does encroach on the privacy of the neighbors and doesn't look well on the site, I have concerns around that.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the speaker? Okay, thank you, Ms. Goldie. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the next speaker is Matt and Katie Jaros, followed by Dee Haydenfeld.
Hello there.
Welcome.
Into this to thoroughly consider this neighborhood here.
Oh, wait, sorry. Do you mind restarting? I don't know if my computer froze or if yours froze, but would you mind just starting your comment again?
Sure. No, I just want to say thank you to the committee. Thank you to the neighbors for going the extra mile here late on a Monday night. And thank you to Mr. Bachman for coming out and do a thorough kind of research on the road here. I do echo several of the comments made by the fellow neighbors. My wife and I moved here about a little over a year ago, and we're attracted to the private nature and kind of nature-esque vibe of the street. And driving down the street, you can't see too many of the houses and nothing's too kind of overpowering or dominant. But I feel the current proposed layout and placement kind of goes against that neighborhood feel, and definitely can understand from our neighbors at 4146 their perspective of the privacy intrusion. My bigger concerns really are around the safety of the road. I understand, kind of tested and made sure that, you know, most of the road's 20 feet, but I've also been around quite a bit of construction and understand in reality, trucks are coming and going, and they're not always parked exactly on the right side of the road. I have a baby on the way, so I'm a little concerned about the safety, just getting in and out, as well as the noise and the construction, because we all understand this is no small engineering feat that this project's going to kind of bring on if approved. So, you know, and then further, my other concerns there are, you know, the damage to the road and who's going to incur those costs. The neighbors on this road have all paid for that road, and it, you know, as the comments have been made, it's already starting to show a little wear and tear, and undoubtedly with all that construction, they'll continue to wear and tear and likely need some repairs. So I don't know if that's been addressed, as well as just overall drainage. We have a pretty big drainage problem on our street, and I haven't really seen too much information addressing what's going on with and how that's going to be handled properly. Those are my primary concerns, and last I'll say is, you know, I understand the rules around 2 versus 3 story, but in my mind, I see three floors, and I think 3 stories. So I have a hard time fathoming how it'd be classified as 2. I understand the stipulations, but it does seem a little out of place. So, so my concerns, and appreciate everyone's participation.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the speaker? Okay, seeing none, thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Dee Haydenfeld. If you would like to make a public comment, please use the raise hand function at the bottom of your screen and leave your hand raised.
Can you hear me now?
We can.
I was wondering, thank you for the opportunity. Would you mind if I shared my screen real quick?
Yeah, please.
Thank you. So I want to share with you the primary concern I want to express is privacy. What you're looking at the left is from our deer fence in the side of our yard. This is our view. To the right is the view from the master bedroom, master bath. As I've spoken to the applicant, I understand that he has the right to develop his property. In fact, I've told him that. I've asked him, please, can we move this, center it on the property and lower it? Because as you can see from this side view, we're going to get the full benefit of 3 stories. Now, 2 things are creating this unreasonable destruction of privacy. One is the location that they're decided to attempt to place the house, and the other is the design. And obviously these 2 issues are the things that this meeting is all about, siding and massing. Now, in regards to the massing, I've read the zoning regulations, and I find it interesting that it talks about a basement, cellar, or an unused underfloor space. I don't know how a garage can conform to a basement, cellar, or unused underfloor space, because a garage is anything but an unused underfloor space. In fact, garages have specific doors that are designed for them. They are used daily. They have a specific purpose. So I asked the committee to please reconsider this situation, because what we're looking at from our view is a 3-story building. The second item has to do with the limitations. As I've asked before, to please center this on the property. One of the reasons that has been given for not centering it on the property or moving it to another space on the property is trees. Well, if you read the consulting arborist report, It outlines that 12 trees would be removed, primarily based upon the 75-foot driveway. But also, there are going to be another 10 trees that will be adversely affected and likely to be removed, including those 2 trees that you see right in front of you. So when we start looking at fenestrations and sight lines, you got to start removing many of the trees. Naturally, they're going to be there because we're up to about 22 trees that are already going to be removed. And this is one of the reasons why the staff report came out asking for a revised arborist report and accurate tree inventory with accurate tree grip lines. We're at 22 trees right now, excluding a hammerhead. I simply ask that the commission, before making any decision, let's get an accurate arborist report to evaluate additional site locations. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the speaker? Okay, thank you, Mr. Hayden-Cole. Are there any other speakers?
If you would like to make a public comment on this item, please use the raise hand function. There are no other hands raised at this time.
Okay, thank you. So that will close the public comment portion of the item, and we will bring it back to the applicant's team. So you do have 5 minutes to address any comments that you heard or provide any additional information that you would like.
I'm going to share my screen here. Let's see here. Okay. So I'm going to address the visibility. So this is the house at right at 4104, right as you drive onto the private portion of Los Erbis. And this is what you see right as you turn left. This is the view from the side of the road. As you can see, this house goes straight up. It is built right on the downslope. Mr. Delamar's house is nowhere near as close to the road as this is. So we're not asking to design or build or locate a house that's any different than what is already existing on the street. In addition, yes, we've provided alternative. This Rahera Drive is right off of the first portion of Los Erbis as you're driving in. Camellia, you can see all of these show 3 distinct levels. These are all houses that are designed similarly to what we've provided in our design, and that are close to where we are proposing to design. Now, this one is on Upper Happy Valley, but you can see there's 3 distinct levels, and this one is kind of behind Stanley, but you can also see 3 distinct levels here. So we're not, again, asking we're not proposing a design that hasn't already been built or designed and approved by the city of Lafayette in the Hillside development area. Jill, did you have anything to add?
So I just wanted to cover a couple of points. I forget which speaker brought it up, but he mentioned that we have 3 levels stacked on top each other. And if you again look at the site sections, we do not have 3 levels stacked atop each other. We were careful to keep the levels independent so that we didn't create additional height. Regarding construction traffic, our plan is to build the driveway first. So we have a place to stage our vehicles, keep them off the road and keep things open. Nice place for the dumpsters, everything. Get up there, do the driveway and the garage pad, and we have plenty of room to work up there without impacting the street. One of the speakers brought up a possible second home on the property. We do not have any intention of doing a second home. We're doing 1 home, and we chose what we feel in our research is the best level for it. It has the fewest trees and it is the flattest. Drainage is, we are working closely with our soils engineer and our civil engineer, and the actual details of all of this will be finalized when we get into actual construction drawings. I know that our civil engineer is in close contact with the city engineer, and they've had many discussions on how to deal with the drainage, and that is a concern we are taking care of. We just don't have all these answers yet because it's still in the design phase. Let's see. Again, regarding windows looking towards the Haydenfells, none of those windows are in rooms that are habitable. They're transition spaces, they're windows for light only. And when you are looking, we are on a hill. Our property is considerably higher than theirs. That's the natural topography of the land. There's no way we're not going to be taller than them. Any place we put the house on the property is going to be higher. So it's just working contours, keeping the house as low a profile as we can. And I think we've achieved that by stepping the house and burying as much of it as possible to keep it low, going with a flat roof, keeping a more modern design instead of having a pitched roof, which would make it feel much taller, much larger. I mean, I think it's, you know, a design that with some recommendations from the commission and some clarification on 2.5 stories and how we can make sure we're all in agreement with that. I think it's a project we like to move forward with.
Okay. Thank you. I assume that's the end of your response. I don't want to cut you off if there was another 20 more seconds.
I will address landscaping. We're more than happy to plant whatever we need to do to screen more from the Hayden fields, and we'll work with them in doing so.
Okay, great. Thank you. So that I think we can stop the screen share. And commissioners, are there any last questions for the applicants team that came up from public comment? Commissioner Sturm?
I wanted to request that they pull up one of the earlier slides that had the pink house. In a more central location.
We're talking about the siding figure, the constraints figure. Okay.
Let's see. Here, this one?
I think it's still loading, yeah.
Oh. Let's see, make sure that I can share it. Can you see it now?
Yep.
And this is not in our packet, correct? We don't have this?
This was the response to staff comments that was given to Joshua on the 7th, I believe.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay, I see it. Okay. I guess one additional question is, so I see what you're saying, that this has a further impact on trees. Why is the home oriented toward the neighbors? Is that all because of the topography contours?
It does.
Parallel to the topography.
Mm-hmm. Correct. In addition, the view is out this way. Mount Diablo is out through here.
Okay.
May I make another comment regarding that? When you look at sliding it over, it shortens the driveway, which means we are considerably lower, which means we're cutting that much more into the hill. And so it requires a lot more grading. So by doing this, we're able to keep the slope what we need it to be, not cut as much into the hillside, and again, stay with the contours. The contours start to turn again. You can kind of see with the contours that are showing how they start to curve back up on the right side. Mm-hmm. So this is the most natural spot to be parallel with the contours.
And on the driveway, if you wanted to site the house, say further up the hill, could you make the slopes work with the driveway for it to maybe come in how you're showing it, but then sort of turn back? Or did you look
We
at
played
any
with
other?
all sorts. We don't have the room to do that.
In addition, we have to meet the 150 feet hose pole to the back corner of the house, right? So you're talking about potentially sliding it up the hill here.
Right. I was just trying to.
The other thing with sliding it up the hill is it actually becomes more visible from the street. Right now, when you're standing on the street, there's enough of a slope right in your line of sight that you don't, the hill itself blocks a fair portion of it. If it's higher up, you're going to see more.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Donna had a 3D from that.
Yeah, let's see. I think Joshua had it nice. This is the 3D from this is the opposite side of the Los Erebus.
Okay. It's in the packet.
Yes.
That's standing. That's
standing on the opposite side of Los Erebus. I have a let's see, if we go here and we go here, these are all of the perspective views with a camera angle map here. So the view I just showed you was from the opposite side of Los Erebus. There's also a couple from the driveway. So this is one standing in the driveway looking up at the house here. And this is from the opposite side of Los Erebus here. And then this is the view from the bottom of the driveway.
So in these, there's no differentiation between where there's paving and where it would be a hillside.
And in these perspective views, there's not, no, not currently.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Delamar, go ahead. I feel like you wanted to maybe chime in on this. Yeah, I cannot hear you. I don't know if it's just me, but I hear, yeah, I don't think anyone can hear you.
You'll want to check where your microphone is sourcing from. So in the lower left corner of the Zoom window, where there's that mute button, there's also a caret, and you can select a device.
Did you just say you connected to audio if you want to try?
If you'd like to call in, there's also a call-in number that we can provide. Would you like the phone number to call in? Okay, it is 669-900-9128.
Hi, you want me to put you on speaker? Okay. So I have Todd on speakerphone here.
Sorry about that.
I don't think it's gonna work because I have to put me on mute.
So I just wanted to make
It's not gonna work. Can I relay what you'd like to say? Yes. Mhm. Okay, I'll paraphrase. Okay. So Mr. Delamar would like to let it be known that there is a property line dispute on the Haydenfeld side, which makes it seem that the house is closer to his property than it actually is.
Okay, thank you for sharing. Are there any other questions? Okay. Thank you. So at this time, we will just bring it back to the commission. And, yep, perfect, thank you. So again, just a reminder, our charge tonight is to review the proposed project, conduct a public hearing, provide direction to the applicant, and then continue the item to a future date in order to allow for the applicant to respond to our comments tonight and to public comment heard tonight. So I will open it up to fellow commissioners for any initial thoughts. While you're pulling those together, I will just kind of summarize the public comments that we have heard tonight. We've heard comments regarding privacy, siting, looking at other sites and locations on the property, the retaining walls, drainage, a concern potentially of car headlights and lighting, the concern of the house actually being 3 stories, depending on the interpretation of the code, massing, height, siding, road repairs on the private portion of the road. And I think that is it. There was a question on, or a thought that potentially, again, related back to siding, that maybe the house could be shifted, and then a concern future development may include a second house. So that's a summary of the comments that we did here. If that is anything to help a conversation, but I will open up to commissioners for initial thoughts and direction to provide to the applicant. Commissioner Mason.
Well, my early feelings, we just spent a lot of time on a house where we had one person, one neighbor complaining. Here we have a house where there isn't a single neighbor that was speaking for it. For one is, I'd like to get a reading from staff about what constitutes ground or grade for that first story. And whether it can be raised up, pushed down, or whatever. But for me, that house just reads from the street just too massive from the front elevation. And again, in deference to the people who came before us, too massive by a lot. It's not just shaving 6 inches off of it or something like that. I don't necessarily have problems with the square footage. It's just mostly from that front elevation.
The front elevation meaning along Los Cerberus.
Yeah, the Los Cerberus, it really reads as a 3-story, especially when you make that first story 12 feet. You know, stories in Lafayette are 10 feet. You know, this is 12 feet and it goes up from there.
Thank you. Commissioner Farson?
Thank you, Chair. So I guess my initial thoughts, I understand the neighbors are not happy, as Commissioner Mason said, but respectfully, the only thing that I really heard constructively was from Mr. Heidenfeld about potentially centering it, and specifically talking about privacy on their home. So that's why I'm stuck here. I understand there's nothing there and people are used to nothing being there. And it just sounds more to me like they don't want a home there. And again, I don't know if that's the case, but that's the way it sounds to me. So I'm having trouble here kind of centering what commentary I have with respect to the neighbors per se. The two architects at least said the reason they couldn't center it was because of topography, more grading, et cetera, et cetera. Again, I will always defer to staff. I'll defer to the experts on that. But I guess sitting here today, the applicant has a right to build a home there. I guess the question is, going back to what Commissioner Mason said, if it's a matter of the massing from Los Cerberus, at least from the 3D pictures that I saw, it did not look that massive. But again, I have driven there, so looking at the story poles, it's a little bit different than looking at the 3D views that we saw. So there is a real life difference between seeing it in person with the story poles versus what the 3D imaging is. So I guess I'm stuck here. I guess that would be the only commentary that I would have in terms of things to change, is potentially working towards the massing from Los Cerberus. But other than that, right now, I don't know what else to add. Again, I'm also always concerned about privacy issues, but if true, those windows are for lighting only and no one's going to be using those rooms. So there may not be a privacy issue from that looking down into the Haydenfield home. So that's kind of where I am right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so I had to get off mute. Thank you. Any other initial thoughts? Commissioner Mason?
Sorry, I just wanted to clarify something with Commissioner Farzan, because I do agree that in general, people have the right to build, and looking at something that's not there. For me, this, after out there, this is somewhat different simply because they'd be removing so many mature oaks. You know, there's no way you're going to plant anything to replace a 48-inch oak tree. So I think this one here, seeing as we are fairly sensitive about trees here, and I don't know if there's anything else that could be done to minimize loss of trees, because it's a very, very heavily wooded street, very, very heavily wooded property. But I just wanted to raise that as the tree issue is somewhat separate from, you know, what's there. And I would look forward to, you know, a true arborist report and a more accurate reading of what we would have to give up.
Thank you, Commissioner Farzan. And then Commissioner Sturm.
Actually, I was going to respond to that. Thank you, Chair. And I appreciate those comments. I don't think you're going to probably find a bigger fan of oak trees than me. I have a massive one in my house that if it ever goes, I don't have a house. So put it that way. So if we could find a way to get rid of less oaks, I'm completely in favor of that. You probably heard me say that a million times over, but the question really is, what can be done where the property owner has a right to build their home, and at the same time doing as much as we can to save the oak trees? And I'm also very much in favor of getting another arborist report out there to see what we have. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Farzan. Commissioner Sturm, and then Commissioner Maggio.
So as a starting point, I too would want whatever staff thinks is appropriate in terms of making sure that the arborist report, we have an accurate arborist report. And then I would leave it to staff to figure out the height issue and provide, comments to the applicant on how they might be able to be in compliance based on the interpretation of our code. It seemed that the other big issues that the neighborhood had, like fire access, I really appreciate the fire chiefs being here and walking through that, and I feel comfortable. I mean, they're the experts, and he's vetted everything, so that all sounded good to me. In terms of like the construction and dump truck concerns, that's something that's fairly common when we have construction on hillsides, and there's ways to deal with that and plan for it. And in terms of damage to a private street, that's also very common, and that's something that the neighbors deal with. That's not a city issue as long as it's a private street. In terms of visibility, I do feel like I do feel like a lot of the issues come from also another typical situation that we have of people of a neighborhood being used to an area being undeveloped, and then having to get used to what is it going to look like when a home is built there, and it's especially a visual adjustment when it's a hillside lot, because it seems high and it seems big just because of the nature of the topography. That said, I do have some discomfort with the orientation of the house towards the closest neighbor, and so there, to me, there's an orientation, and I understand that the applicant's team is working with the topography and the trees, which I really appreciate. So I don't know that I have something that I would like to see instead of that, but I in general, it would be better if the house wasn't feeling like it was facing a neighbor, especially on a large lot. And I appreciate the owner bringing up the potential lot line issue, because when I was out there prior to when this was supposed to be scheduled on an earlier meeting, I did think it seemed like the house was hugged over towards towards the shared property line there. And it seemed like there was, and I looked back at the plans and I was trying to figure out, like, well, it doesn't look like it's that far over to the left. But anyway, so that was, maybe that's the answer to my question about why it didn't seem to be, it seemed to be more off center than it's shown in the plans. But again, like in terms of, so I mean, in an ideal world, the house would be centered more centrally, just to give all of the neighbors the most space possible. But in terms of privacy issues, we have had, there is this adjacency issue with houses being higher and being much closer than this, and typically those privacy issues are mitigated by making sure there's not direct views, so high windows, maybe orienting spaces that aren't as active on the neighbor's side, and then also vegetation. So I appreciate that the applicant's team has already been trying to use some of those tools. So that's all of my thoughts at this point.
Thank you. Any other commissioner thoughts right now? Commissioner Maggio?
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'm separating the design of the house and really looking at the property. So for siding, if you were to not look at the design and you were just to look at the property, where would you side it? And, I can see why they sided it in the clearing and why it's not on the top of the hill, because part of our design review guidelines is to ask us to bring it down as low as feasible to prevent these extra long driveways and such. So, I mean, it makes sense where the house was sited, but I think And I'm really surprised that we would be looking at a design where we're not sure that it even meets our ordinance, whether it's 2.5 or 3 stories. So I'm surprised it would come to us where that hasn't been confirmed, because now we've already started the clock ticking here. And we don't know if this is something that could even be built. So as the other commissioners have said, we need an accurate arborist report. We need to be sure that this particular siding, massing, 3, 2.5 story thing actually complies with the city before I think I can really evaluate it, because it may not comply and there may have to be some substantial changes. And then the third thing that troubles me is the hammerhead. And I want to be sure, obviously, we're all very concerned about fire danger these days. And I want to be sure that the solution is for the neighborhood, and that the neighborhood isn't forced to accept a large solution just because this house is being added to the neighborhood. So I want to see a fire access evacuation solution that benefits everyone and isn't forced upon them by virtue of one project.
Thank you, Commissioner Sturm.
I have a follow-up question on Commissioner Maggio's last comment. My understanding was that if any neighbors wanted to build an ADU, I guess maybe not an addition necessarily, but an additional residential unit, that this improvement would need to be made. That it's sort of like right now, I guess maybe the neighborhood's not in compliance, and so this development is triggering it. But I know that the adjacent neighbor that spoke, their house, I forget, I did speak with them briefly when I was out there at the site visit before the previously scheduled hearing. And it was just an informational, they were sharing all of their thoughts with me. But I think they said their house was maybe built in 2016 or thereabouts, so it's not that old. So I don't know why this wouldn't have come up when they built. Maybe if the fire chief's still on, he could speak to that.
He is still an attendee, and I've invited him to join us again if he so wishes.
Give him a second. Welcome. Were you able to hear Commissioner Sturm's question?
Yes. So I believe the question is about the hammerhead, and is the trigger being required because of this development? That answer is yes. It does benefit the entire neighborhood, but we don't have the authority to come into an existing neighborhood and say there's a dead end with no appropriate turnaround on a private street, and you need to put in a cul-de-sac or hammerhead T. Where we do have the authority with the fire code is if you're going to build a new structure, that they have to provide us with the proper access and water supply for that new structure that they're building, which now triggers what is the turnaround that you have at the end of this dead-end street. And can that turnaround be accomplished by staying on your property and not encroaching on neighbors' properties to say that we would have to modify neighbors' property for that turnaround. And that's why there was some leniency given on that. The slope of the neighbor's property driveway, the top of the drive that would be used for that turnaround, does not meet the fire code minimum or maximum slope that it can achieve, but we can still turn around, utilize that drive turning around with our apparatus. And it doesn't, and we even reduced it to say not even meeting the minimum requirements what the fire code calls out, but the minimum requirement of what the apparatus that we have spec'd in our jurisdiction needs to turn around. So it did shrink that down, I believe, by 4 feet in width.
Okay, and then, so if a neighbor, so if this application wasn't on the table, but a neighbor was wanting to build a new structure in an ADU, they would be required to have turnaround space?
So I provided them a letter about, and it was really about road width, that I needed the neighbors to all be bought into this 20-foot wide. Again, it's complicated when it's a private road, that on any public roads that's either owned by the city or owned by the county and maintained by a municipality, we have the jurisdiction to come in and say, there's an easement, this road must be 20-foot wide, cleared with vegetation. And we can work with Public Works and come through and just clear and cut that 20-foot width, actually even without the property owner's consent, because it's a public roadway and that's the easement on a public road. When you get on a private road, it's a little more complicated. And we've been advised that on private roads, to meet the 20-foot clearance, we need to work with the property owners to maintain that 20-foot clearance. And that's why we're taking the approach of we'll even provide the manpower and the resources to cut that 20-foot clearance and work with the homeowners to provide that to the best of our ability where it's feasible. And if there's a couple spots it reduces to 18 feet, then we feel that we've still improved that road dramatically by providing the best case scenario, working with the property owners.
Okay. And if one of the neighbors had a proposal for a new structure in the future after the structure was built, then what you're doing now would allow that future project to meet fire code requirements?
So remodels don't trigger a turnaround requirement. ADUs is kind of a gray area. ADUs still say that an ADU must meet access and water, and they still have to meet the hose pole requirement. There's still some discrepancy on, does a dead end and a turnaround requirement, is that required on an ADU? And we're still trying to get confirmation, we'll say in language from the state level there's a lot of exceptions with ADUs. And we haven't been able to get clear direction on it. Does ADU not require a turnaround? It does identify that it still needs to have access, which is that 150-foot hose pole. We are actually in the middle of, so in this section of the code, it does say the 150-foot hose pole can be increased if the fire code official authorizes it. We are coming up with a general determination throughout our entire jurisdiction that says if you're going to build an ADU or accessory structure, that will allow that hose pole to go up to another 100 feet if it's sprinkled. Because again, looking at an operational standpoint, that's the amount of hose that our firefighters would carry on our apparatus. When they show up at a scene, they're going to put 200 feet of 2.5 inch on the ground, put a gated Y connected with another 100 feet of 1 3/4 inch. So we're comfortable in increasing that to 250 feet because a lot of ADUs really struggle with that 150-foot hose pole requirement. But if they're sprinkled, we're willing to add the other 100-foot distance to increase that to 250 feet from where the apparatus is staged.
Got it. Thank you. That was very, very helpful. I appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you. Any other thoughts, Vice Chair LaBonge?
I was looking at the photo I took when I was out at the site, and I think in one of the drawings, it shows there's fill in front as you go up the hill. So before you get to the house, there's actually some fill, and then there's some cuts to put the three levels in, 2.5 levels. And the only reason I'm pointing that out is I think it's hard to not drive up there and see the story poles and go, wow, that's big, because it's up a hill, right? Anything is going to look big. But I do think that this is taking into this design, especially when we look at the previous design we were working on earlier tonight, it takes into account, and it rides with the kind of the topography of the land. I will agree that the 2 versus 3, I'm going to assume that staff will work that out and tell us it meets or doesn't meet, because I'm not going to start, getting out my slide rule and trying to figure that one out. So assuming that, is this in the right spot? Yeah, it seems like it is based on the grades that we've seen. And is it going to be tall? Yes, it's up a big hill. It's definitely tall. That's their right to do. And so I am, at this point in support of this. I do want to see the arborist report and see what that brings up, but I don't see a reason why this can't be done. The whole thing with the disagreement on the property line, I found that a little interesting, because surely that would make, some of those, how close something should be. And I know we don't get involved with that, but I did appreciate the applicant's, description of how the windows would be minimized in terms of how they would show in screening, and also the use of landscaping to further kind of block those view issues. So I'm sharing my point that this is something I could support.
Thank you.
If I could add one more comment about the property dispute, because I was talking to the next door neighbor, actually. I stopped there on my way home from work because I had asked that the site do the stakes. And sorry, let me try and share screen to show the picture. So I took a picture of it today with the staking that was out. And if you'll notice to the left, you can see where you mentioned the property dispute, what was occurring. And, I did bring up that in the event that that the neighbor were to win the property dispute, and let's say that turnaround is on his property, that turnaround could move over to where the property line is shown and still meet the turnaround. It would bump everything down a little bit, but it would still just line up that turnaround could still be accomplished. So if that dispute, if he were to win that dispute, that would be the only thing that I would, I guess, want clarified or listed. We'll list it when we approve. If it does go to permit and we permit this AMM, that will be one of the things that we identify, is that if a property dispute is resolved and this is not on his property, that he'll need to make sure that the turnaround is then installed still in accordance with the minimum design, but that it would be on his property. Because if he were to win that dispute, he could say he would want his landscaping restored. We would still be in the position that we would want the turnaround to still exist. It could exist if it moves over that 5 to 7 feet that they appear to be disputing.
Thank you for clarifying. Commissioner Stern.
I just wanted to add one comment because I realized I forgot to comment on the massing. I like the way the building steps with the slope. That's what we usually want to see. So with the story issue aside, I'm comfortable with the stepping and the overall massing.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll move to my comments because that's what I was going to touch on. I have the south elevation pulled up from the staff report, page 4 of 6. And yeah, I did appreciate, one thing we always say is that we do want to see stepping in with the hillside, and 3 stories or 2 stories, whatever this is considered, it does step, in my opinion, with the hillside. I do appreciate the applicant's presentation and the thought process of walking us through why this siding was selected due to slopes due to being parallel with the topography, minimizing grading. The window selection on the south side elevation, specifically to address privacy concerns. Right now, from what we heard from staff, this is a 3-story house, and that piece is a bit frustrating. So hopefully that can be revisited. But what we are looking at for the phase 1 application is siding and massing. I do think since it is an undeveloped parcel, seeing any type of development is a stark contrast to what's there now, but it is a parcel owner's right to develop a parcel. And also due to the fact that we're looking uphill, but unlike some other applications that we've seen, there is a roadway to neighbors below. There are neighbors to each side, but like I said, I do feel the applicant is trying to make an effort to think through those and have conversations and think through their design, how to minimize impacts. I agree with Commissioner Labange and Maja and pretty much everybody who said it, that an arborist report is definitely needed. We did hear a comment regarding drainage. I know that is part of the process, but if that's something that, just the applicant's team can be aware of, I'm confident that will come up more. And then I feel like some commissioners were maybe a little half and half on the front elevation view from the roadway. I personally do appreciate on the kind of renderings on the, I'm trying to look on my other screen here, which page they're on. I can't pull it up quickly, but the renderings and how a large portion of the house is hidden and portions of the garage are hidden. I think that is nice. So, what else? So, and then also the applicant's willingness to kind of enhance landscaping as needed to work with the neighbors. But again, back to our charge tonight of massing and siding. I do think it is situated in the appropriate place on the site. The massing, I think there are tweaks that can be made to maybe not appear as large from the street, but as a whole, I am fine with it. I just am not fine with it being a 3-story based off of the code definition that it appears to be 3 stories. Are there any additional comments that are new that anyone would like to add, just to make sure that staff is able to capture, to provide, the feedback to the applicant? I'm sure they're hearing everything still, and are capturing their own notes, but anything additional? While you're thinking of that, I do also appreciate Commissioner Farsan, your comment early on, excuse me, that it's just kind of maybe a reminder for the next time we see this and it does come back. Any comments that members of the public can provide that are also kind of like conducive to a solution are very helpful. Definitely, we do want to hear if you're concerned, just say, about privacy or the road, quality, something like that. But I do think Commissioner Farsan, you made a great point of, if there's anything that we're hearing that can actually make it a better project, please make sure you share those in the next meeting. For example, if the south elevation did not already have, windows that were minimizing views to the neighbors, that would be a great type of suggestion to help make it a better project. Even though this is siding and massing, but anything else from commissioners? I'll ask one more time. Okay, so Joshua, do we need to give you a motion, or I'm just going here on the agenda. It says provide direction, continue the item to a date certain to allow the applicant to respond. So a date certain, is there a set date? And then I'll ask that to Joshua and then Commissioner Maggio.
Yeah, so as far as a certain date, that is essentially the commission would choose the date of the next hearing. It could be the next scheduled meeting, which would be May 2nd, or if the applicant believes that more time is warranted for gathering the materials required, May 16th would be the next one. But in the motion, you would be able to specify which date certain you would continue it to.
Okay, and Renata, I'll ask you to chime in, but I believe May 2nd is a heavy agenda, so maybe May 16th, if the applicant is willing, it would also give the applicant's team a little more time. Okay. Commissioner Maggio and then Commissioner Mason.
I was about to make a motion, so I don't know if Commissioner Mason has more questions.
Yeah, I'll open it up.
So let's let him go first.
Yeah, before the motion. And then I will just say, the only reason why I was saying we have a heavy agenda on May 2nd is this, I think in general, we like to make sure that each item has adequate energy to focus and time allotted to an item. And that agenda is just really heavy with other general plan items. Commissioner Mason?
Yes, my general question or comment is, I know I personally raised the issue about the arborist report. I don't know how the other commissioners feel, but for me, the siting and massing is part and parcel with the arborist report, and until we have a date certain when that would be done, I wouldn't feel comfortable. Having said that, I'm not going to, I can defer to how the other commissioners feel. I just wouldn't want to make that in the phase 2 a determining factor.
Yeah, thank you. Joshua?
I do have some feedback in terms of that. The applicant has indicated that they should be able to get me an arborist report to review for the next hearing by April 25th. So we would definitely have one in time. And if we didn't have one in time, I would recommend continuing it without discussion, just so we have the full comprehensive picture for this phase 1 discussion.
Perfect. So it sounds like the thing we're asking for the arborist report, clarification on the number of stories, as well as anything else mentioned tonight. Anything else before Commissioner Maggio makes a motion? Okay, Commissioner Maggio, please.
Okay. I move that we continue HDP 32-21, giving the applicant time to provide an accurate arborist report, to make any adjustments they need to make to comply with the city's 2.5 feet or less requirement. So if it is 3 stories, as the city has calculated, there needs to be some redesign. Let's see, what else did we want them to bring back? Does everyone have enough information on that hammerhead and its location? Because we might want to be sure that that's determined. And I think I saw that the surveyor is Human & Company, so they are having a survey done. So that should tell us exactly where the property lines are going to be. So that will also be helpful if they can bring that back as well.
Thank you. And then a friendly note, I believe by accident you said something like 2.5 feet rather than 2.5 stories.
Thank you.
So just
it's late.
Yeah.
And one more note, if you could please add the date certain.
I said
in the
May
motion.
16th.
Okay,
I
thank
thought
you.
I said May 16th.
Perfect.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a motion by Commissioner Maggio. In a second.
Second.
Oh, Commissioner Mason for the win. Okay, so we have a motion by Commissioner Maggio, second by Commissioner Mason. We'll do a roll call vote. Commissioner Farsan,
Aye.
Commissioner Maggio,
Aye.
Commissioner Mason,
Aye.
Commissioner Sturm,
Aye.
Vice Chair Labange,
Aye.
and Commissioner Radnich. Aye. So thank you, Joshua, for that item. And now we will move to item 7, new public hearings. There's none. Item 8, other business, ARC volunteer for the 29th. Commissioner Maggio, thank you. I assume staff, that's still virtual. Everything's still virtual, right? Yeah, okay, perfect. Commissioners report, item 9. Tomorrow we do have an in-person GPAC meeting, so it will not actually be available to the public on Zoom, but it is available to the public. And it's kind of a feedback session to regroup on the last year and a half, 2 years, and lessons learned, practices for moving forward. So that'll be interesting. Renata, is there anything else on that for GPAC? I think that's basically it. And then any other commissioners' reports? Okay. Item 10, planning director's report.
I don't believe staff has any updates at this time.
Okay. Well, with that, 10:57, 3 minutes shy of 11. Thank you, everybody.